Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
Round 3 of the Motogp Circus lands at Texas for one of the stranger weekends that we always have in the calendar. Texas, of course, has the Circuit of the Americas, and it is just one of those weird circuits where up, down, left, right, no matter which way you go around it, it is just a bit of a ripply, mad mess of America. But it's an interesting weekend every time we get there. It's always at the start of the season where it's a bit of a weird race, weird track, just a bit funky. I think it's good for the calendar, and I think Rhys would agree. Rhys, what do you think overall of just the Austin, Texas kind of feel and Circuit of the Americas?
Yeah, I like the track. I think it's just such a different layout to like what we have everywhere else. So it really does throw up the odd result. I mean, look back to last year. I mean, I still can't believe that Alex Rins won last year. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things. We've had some pretty boring races around there, in all honesty, over the time. But the actual track itself just provides some strange races as well. Like I remember Moto2 a couple of years ago, no one wanted to seem to win that. They were crashing. It's just it does throw up a bit of a spark, and I think that's because a lot of the track surface, because it's built on this sort of like clay kind of soil, so it kind of moves around, it gets wet, and it actually moves the foundations of the circuit around, so it creates all these bumps, so it constantly has to get resurfaced and fixed, and they just don't have the money to resurface the whole thing, so it's kind of a bit patchy all over the places. I mean, I remember some years we've gone, it's been like completely unacceptable. This year it doesn't seem too bad. I mean, there's a few areas it's not great, but a lot less complaints. But yeah, I mean, it's great to have a race in America, right? Because if we didn't have Austin at the moment, we wouldn't have anything. And I think that would obviously be a shame because we need to go everywhere. And if you're, even as an American fan, right, the fact that it's in Texas is still not very convenient. It's almost like we could very easily go to like Jerez or something like that. It's like the same kind of thing. Like it's almost like saying, well, that's your home race, but it's like 3,000 miles away from like where you live or whatever. I don't know if that's the right scale, but that kind of vibe. So I've probably gone on a little bit about it already, but it's good. And yes, you get some kind of strange results occasionally. I think we've had maybe a couple of Baldassarre wins there, but also the cream kind of rises to the top here a little bit more. I think the riders can make more of a difference than the bikes, so you tend to get the best rider winning and the most talented rider at that point in time winning, which probably explains why Marquez won so often there in his sort of period of dominance, to be honest.
Yeah, it is definitely good to see us in stateside. It's just a shame that the track is built where it is, because I actually like the track. I like the layout, and if it was a bit smoother, it would actually be a really fun racetrack. But as you do mention, it's built on this kind of weird clay bogland where every time we go there, it gets rippled. I believe IndyCar goes there, NASCAR, us, Motor America go there, and F1 as well, which obviously creates ripples no matter where they go. So I think 4 or 5 million was spent this time since we've been here last year. And if you watch the TV coverage, you will see the very dark black tarmac is the first stuff, and then you go to the more kind of grayer stuff. You can see that was older. So like the big thing for me, if you don't understand with the bumps, is watch them coming into the hairpin at the end of the back straight. You can see where the back tire keeps skipping, because there's basically tarmacs, brake, and you can just constantly see black marks, and you see gaps, and that's just the bikes kind of oscillating over them bumps, and basically you can just see how bad the braking bumps are, which is a very motocross term, but MotoGP at Texas is a bit motocross at times. But we have rambled on and long referring. Just so let's get into the lightweight class of Moto3. Now, Jose Antonio Rueda unfortunately had appendicitis on Saturday evening, had to go straight for surgery. Thankfully, it appears he's okay. Of course, unfortunately, did mean he missed the race. It was unfortunate. Has a good start to the season, second year in the class, and again, it's never good to see Rueda's out due to kind of these injuries. Hopefully he can replicate signs in 2 weeks' time, I believe, when we go to Jerez, and maybe he can win more than 3 years. But we are wishing him the best of luck in his recovery and hope to see him back on his bike on a racetrack pretty soon. But the Moto3 race was a race, again, that was a bit different. A bit of Pirelli, a bit of the track, and a bit of kind of the conditions, and just the first lap, really. Rhys, very messy opening lap. Do you want to explain all the incidents on lap one? Because there was quite a few.
Well, to be completely honest, I can't remember all of them because there was that many. But the one that sticks out to me was Farioli into turn one. Just completely sort of got his braking zone wrong. Clattered into... I can't remember who he hit initially, but it sent Munoz wide, didn't it? A couple others. He was the only one that fell off, fortunately. So that was obviously good, and all the riders somehow managed to avoid him because he was pretty much slap bang in the middle of the pack, slap bang in the middle of the track. I mean, I suppose kind of helped him that it was kind of a light grid today. It was 24 starters, so it was, it was one of those things where like there probably wasn't as many bikes as there normally would be, but even still, they did a very good job to avoid him. So that was the first incident that we had at the first corner. Very early, just completely overcooked it, clattered into somebody, sent a couple of people wide, fell off himself. So that was sort of strike one. A few corners later, Joe Kelso gets it wrong, smacks straight into the back of Danny Holgado. Somehow they both stay on, which I still don't understand. But Holgado actually only loses a couple of spots, does very well to actually keep it on the track. Kelso also does a really good job to actually keep it on the tarmac runoff. Drops to, actually, again, not that far through the pack, sort of mid-packed, so, not too bad there. I think also around the same time, sort of down towards like turn 2, turn 3, I think Josh Watley ended up going off the track. I don't know exactly what happened, but I believe that's what happened there. I think the commentator said that Josh Watley had gone off the circuit, so another incident. Can't remember if this was lap 1, but there was obviously the thing with Ortola and going up the inside of...
That was the end of lap 1, yeah.
Yeah, it's the end of lap 1. It goes up the inside of Nepper, ends up crashing, and he tries to sort of avoid him. Then he actually runs and grabs the wrong bike, which was quite amusing. He ran over to Nepper's bike and tried to pick that one up. It's like, no, you don't ride for MTA anymore. You ride for MT helmets. So that was, I think that's all the incidents. Forgive me if I've forgotten any, but again, I've listed off quite a few there, so it kind of shows you how chaotic it was. Also, it was ridiculous when they crossed the line to end the first lap, and then all the penalties update on the left-hand side, and half the grid had long lap penalties because they'd all been cruising in qualifying. So it was it was ridiculous. There was massive gaps between the pack already. There was people missing. There was people trying to get on the wrong bikes. A list of penalties. It was from the outset one of those races that's just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we always say Moto3 is a bit chaotic, and to be honest, Moto3's been a little bit more boring sometimes the last couple of years because there's been these riders that can set a pace at the front and pull away. And I guess that's kind of what happened here, because also worth noting, Alonso was about 2 seconds in the lead after the first lap because of all the chaos that happened behind him. But you could tell, it was one of those races, you could tell from the first corner even, that it was going to be ridiculous the whole way through.
Yeah, and you do mention there, Alonso does get the break and does run away. It was probably one of the fears coming into the race, pole man getting a start like that, getting clear track. Of course, Motor 3, you can take different lines. If you think back to when Fanati was in the class, if you gave him a 5-second head start nearly any race, he probably would win pretty much every race if he just had the clear track. And I just feel with
if he had a 5-second start.
to be fair, yeah, but just maybe 2 seconds, so to be a bit more realistic. But if you can take the fastest line through the corner, it's just the hand-to-hand combat and the battling is what kind of holds up Motor 3, because the natural racing line of a Moto 3 bike to take all that corner speed is just leaving the door wide open. So that's why we see the fast people don't always win races. They don't, like, again, look how many times did last year Sasaki almost win and stuff like that. So it doesn't always mean the fastest person over one lap or through certain sectors, whatever, can win. And today we saw exactly what I just said. We don't see very often, which is the fastest person over the whole lap gets a break, and in fairness, manages to race very well up until the last quarter of a race, where there was a couple of people come back on him. And at this point in time, I still believe that we were probably robbed a small bit of a grandstand finish, because me sitting there doing slight calculations, I was kind of in my head estimating that Holgado and Conveyor would kind of, and of course Yamanaka would just get onto the back wheel maybe of Alonso with a lap and a half to go, maybe at that. Rhys, am I sounding like I'm correct, or do you reckon that Alonso, if need be, could have pulled more time out?
No, I think that sounds about right. It didn't seem like he had it. I think he did up his pace a little bit at the end after the whole incident happened, and his gap sort of went back up, because I think he ended up about 6 seconds in front by the end. And I think it only got up to about 4 again, or 4.5 when the incident had happened. So he perhaps had a little bit more time in hand, but it did seem like he was struggling with tyres again. He had gone for it from the offset, so I suppose that would be... Pirelli tyres are very fragile. You push them for 1 lap at the start to get the gap, you probably lose 3 or 4 laps of life on them from that. So that they are definitely very different to the Dunlops, and that was a classic way to win on a Dunlop, was to build out a gap early and just not be caught. But yeah, I think maybe we put... I don't know if I'd say a grandstand finish, because I always think when you have races like that where the guy in front is out of tyre and they're being caught, yes, it's great to see the gap come down, but it's not really a grandstand finish because they just roll it to the back of him, just go past him like the standing still. The passing for the position's never particularly very interesting. It's good when they sort of catch them and then they have a bit of a defence for a couple of laps or something like that. I like that a little bit more, but when they're like completely out of rubber and they just roll it to the back of them, it's like, yeah, it's nice to see the gap come down. It's like, oh, that wasn't expected, but I never find the actual passes to be very satisfying, so they just roll past them, like, or just, you know, power past them on the exit of a corner, and it's a bit of a boring pass. But yeah, I think it could have got a bit more interesting, to say the least, anyway, if they'd caught him up. And Colin Veyer was giving it a good go, wasn't he, bless him, until he sent himself to the moon. But yeah, I think potentially it could have been a bit more of an interesting race if that incident hadn't happened. But again, Alonso did the damage early on. They were pushing too hard to try and catch him up, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and you do mention, of course, Colin Veyer going into orbit, really. Very lucky, not
well, we're not in
just
Houston, but we are in Texas after all.
exactly. So not out of the realm of possibility in this part of the world. So, but just back in that incident, we're so lucky he wasn't collected, because it's right in the middle of the snake section, and the onboards of, I believe it's Holgado, shows Yamanaka really doing well to avoid contact with the stricken bike of Colin Veyer, and of course Colin as well in the middle of the track. And it was a proper egg beater, up and down, very rough looking crash.
I'm still surprised
and
he
really,
got back
again,
on, right, and rode it back round to the pits.
Yeah, really was surprised, because he gets back on, keeps going, pulls into the pits, and doesn't seem to be injured at all. The bike seemed, it's such a, yeah, exactly. The leathers did your job, in fairness, but the bike seemed in good nick to some extent after what he had done. But through that snake there's a bit of speed, and again, it was a perfect example that he seemed maybe too confident there, because he looked like he probably was the fastest man. Again, Colin Veyer is probably slightly, in my eyes, a bit too big for the class, so he probably was manhandling that bike through there and just maybe took too much liberty. And again, that's the kind of the golden rule of any racing. You don't try and find time where you're already the fastest. It's kind of a recipe for disaster, and that's kind of what caught Colin out today. But it was just overall a pretty strange crash for the Dutchman.
Yeah, he was lucky not to get collected. I mean, it's bad enough as it is, like normally going through that section. I mean, we've seen crashes through there in the past. You're like, oh, he's you could almost hit him, but it was made worse by the fact that Yamanaka was going for a pass at the same time. So there was going like two bikes side by side, so it was like double the width, and they were off the normal line. I think they're on the normal line, they can react a bit more, and like they would have both been where Holgado was effectively, so they would have been able to pick up a bit easier. But Yamanaka was so close to him on Holgado's on board, it was ridiculous. Like the gap was so small. So we were very lucky there that it wasn't a bigger crash, because I'm not sure Veyer himself would have got clipped. I think he would have probably collapsed into his bike, which would have been a pretty bad accident, because we've seen those before where you smack a bike, your bike's basically stops immediately, get chucked over the handlebars, and it's just a nasty little accident. So fortunately, everyone seems to have got away with it okay, and that's always the most important thing. That's the danger we have with these sort of snaking sections. They're great, and they do provide some great overtaking opportunities, as we saw Yamanaka, for example, was going for one, and I think he'd done it in a couple of places, and we saw some sort of attempts at it in the MotoGP race and in Moto2 and stuff like that as well. But obviously the danger of it is when you crash, everyone's changing direction very quickly, so it's hard to sort of avoid more. And also we can see if you crash at one point, you can slide all the way across. I'm not 100% sure, but I guess it's kind of what happened to Morbidelli in the MotoGP race, because he crashed and then it cut to him and he was like legging it up the track, so I imagine his bike had slid quite far. So yeah, that is the danger with those kind of sections.
Yeah, it's one of those pieces of track where it's an amazing kind of spectacle to watch them go through. We have seen over the years where there's the front, and because you're snaking back through, a bike can easily can just go straight through that line and just cause mayhem. I don't believe it was 2 years ago where we saw a bike struck in is it Moto2 like FP2? It might have been Vietti, and the bike was just right in the middle of the race in line, and a lot of riders just had to pick up and basically straight line the S section in practice. Just was a bit of it's one of those ones as well. In a car, it's a quick change of direction, and it's one where it'll put a lot of force into obviously the car and the ground. So I think again, if I go back maybe to 20 was Rossi's last year, 21 I believe it was, the middle of the snake there was just a massive like dip and boulder. It was just really like bottomed the bike out as they changed direction. It was one of those things that they seemingly have fixed since. But that S section is just, Again, it's an amazing piece of track, but it's just a bit nervy for me, and I just always wince when I see them going through there. And again, we've gotten lucky today, thankfully, and we've gotten lucky in the past, but it's kind of a horrible piece of track for what could potentially happen, because we saw in Moto 2, kind of going straight on you again. You mentioned maybe potentially Morbidelli had some sort of similar issue. It's just the fastest way through there is just be aggressive with the bike, and that's how mistakes are made. So it's overall a pretty kind of dangerous part of the track, really, because unfortunately it is accustomed to these kind of weird and wonderful crashes. But moving on to a podium for our young Spanish friend who is a rookie, and the last lap that was very interesting. Piqueras seems to have a lot in terms of hand-to-hand combat. I just felt he was maybe lacking slightly in pace compared to Yamanaka and Holgado, but he just got his elbows up and made some beautiful overtakes on the last couple of laps, and unfortunately ends up in P3. Could have been P2. The gap was millimeters, I would probably say. The picture, if you've seen the side-on pictures, it was ridiculously close. And again, he seemed to position his bike perfectly, and maybe it's just that little few millimeters Honda versus KTM. But what did you make of his first podium? Of course, Yamanaka misses out as well, and again, Holgado getting very good championship points.
Yeah, I mean, Piqueras, he's a kid that we've heard a lot about. Obviously, he won like the Red Bull Rookies like last year, didn't he? And I think it's something like ridiculous stat, like he won 10 races, and his combined gap to P2 added together is like less than a second. Like, so he won all his races in hand-to-hand combat on the last lap kind of thing. So he wasn't a dominant. And obviously, the first 2 races of the season, he had a pretty bad injury going into the season. He got injured in the go-karting crash, which is the weird thing. Doing some training, I guess, maybe just even having fun. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but some sort of collision in go-karting was a bit of a sort of back injury, rib injury, something like that. I don't know exactly what injury picked up.
Broke vertebrae in his back, I believe. Wow. I don't know about the ribs, but there was broken bones in his back,
I knew
which
he
is very
broke
scary.
Something. I knew it was sort of the back rib, kind of that side area, I guess, somewhere around there. So that could easily happen in a go-karting thing, and it's affected him quite a bit. So he's kind of not been underwhelming, because I mean he's not been that bad as a rookie, to be fair, even still, but it's kind of hampered him. But it seems like maybe he's finally back to some sort of fitness, gets to a bit maybe more of a, like I said earlier, a bit more of a rider circuit. Like, you can make the difference here by being a better rider. Like, again, bring it back, Rins won on a terrible bike last year. Like, it's now I think actually it has become a little bit clearer over time that the Honda actually is quite good at the old Honda was actually probably quite good at Austin, but even still, like, you can make a difference as a rider, and I think that kind of put him up there. As I sort of made the comment as you were talking, like Honda, like I think that's probably why he was lacking the pace compared to the others, because his bike's not as good. But I mean, some of the moves he was pulling were amazing. I mean, kind of a bit parallel to what we see in the MotoGP race a little bit later on, with a rookie pulling these kind of ridiculously amazing passes on other riders that just take that. Like, he very much reminded me actually of the way he was riding, a bit more like Pedro, with the way he was sort of doing everything on the front and the rear, was sort of skating around. Like, it was, yeah, you can just tell already that he's going to be a fantastic rider just from like the very short things we've seen of him. Like, we haven't really seen him all season really. Then obviously he was up the front in this race, and you can just tell by the way he's riding the bike, like, straight away that he's going to be something pretty special. I mean, obviously you hear these things before. Unfortunately, not really seen any Red Bull rookies. I don't know where or how it's shown particularly, but again, it's one of those things I've not really. I think I've watched the odd race when maybe it's on TNT Sports, something like that. But I've not watched a lot of Red Bull rookies in my time. But you hear all these things about how good this kid is, and he's proved it today. And all right, he did get slightly outfoxed by Holgado, but it was pretty close. And the pass he pulled on him was phenomenal to actually get through in the first place. It was just such a shame that Holgado was able to get back past him, but yeah, I don't think he can be too disappointed. It's still got a podium, at this point as well. He didn't completely miss the first 2 rounds, but he's effectively missed them through injury. He's a rookie. You're not really going for the championship. Yes, we've seen rookies do it, but generally it's year 2 if you like something a bit special that you're going to go for the championship. So 2nd or 3rd place isn't probably going to make much difference to him, because the points don't matter so much. Still, it's the first podium, bat up with the people that are fighting for the championship. And to be honest, I'm gonna say it now, I'd be very surprised if he doesn't win a race this season, based on that performance alone. That's a bit premature maybe to say, but it is a good bike effectively. I know I've kind of saying it's not as good as the KTMs, and I still believe that, but it's the Leopard team. They'll get the most out of the Honda. There will be tracks where the Honda's pretty good. there'll be tracks that he knows better. As you know, it's worth noting he's never been here before. He's only done Red Bull Rookies and CV. Never will have been to this circuit before. The two people that beat him today have been to this circuit before. So, you know, you get somewhere like Jerez where we're going next. How many laps will he have done there? I'm sure he'll have done plenty over the years. They've done testing there as well. If he's back to full fitness now, obviously Portimao was another track that he would have known. But, you know, if he was injured, that's obviously why he was struggling a couple of weeks to recover. A couple more weeks to recover still, even if it is a bit of a niggling problem for him still. And I'm sure he's going to be up there in Jerez. It always seems to be the European season where a lot of these guys kick on, but he sort of jumped that a little bit early because usually it's the rookie struggle at the flyaway. So to perform in Austin, yes, it was a bit of a weird race, but I mean, let's not forget, what did he start like 17th and he was like third by the end of the first lap? Like, you don't do that. Like, you don't do that unless you're phenomenal. We saw this is how David Alonso first came to our attention last year, wasn't it? Started terribly. How the hell's this guy got to like second from about 20th on the grid? Like, when riders are doing that, yeah, they are something a little bit different.
For me at the moment, it was, again, just watching Angel today in the race, and it just makes me think. So, at the moment, GP has Pedro. We have Aldeguer in Moto 2. You've David Alonso, Moto 3, and then you have Pierce as well. So, there's 4 people there. Are they the next will class as aliens? Your Rossi, your Lorenzo, your Stone, or Danny? Like, is one of them going to turn out to be the greatest ever MotoGP rider not to win a championship? Is that another Danny we're watching? Because, like, you see these golden era come through of these riders come through at the same time, and you go, well, like, they can't all win. Not everyone can be a 5-time world champion. Like, perfect example is Pedrosa. He was up against arguably the toughest field in MotoGP history. Did ever so well to win the race he did. Came close to many titles, just never got one across the line. And like, are we watching in terms of Acosta, Aldeguer, and Alonso alone? There's 3 riders there that I believe that when they're all on a competitive bike in GP are world champion level riders. So it's going to be interesting over the next couple of years because, again, I was around when Marquez was in Moto 1 to 5 even back in the day. I watched him in Moto 2. I remember, for example, Mir. I remember when he came into Moto 3 and watching how he just seemed to have a bit more than everyone in the class. I remember Jorge Martin in Moto 3. There's just all these things that I'm of a certain age now where I've seen enough of the years to see riders that are currently winning or at the front in GP, how they've come through. And you kind of just, there's certain things that set people apart. And again, we've seen it with Pedro, we've seen it over the last couple of years with him. And of course, then there's all the hype around Fermin Aldeguer over the last 2.5 years, we'll say, when he came up from Moto 2 and CV, and then of course he's been so strong in the class. Obviously he had his issues, but so did Pedro in Moto 2. Moto 2 is just a weird one, so when people struggle in Moto 2, I don't really think it as much as an issue, because look the way Pedro seemed to struggle in Moto 2, and look how he's doing immediately in MotoGP. So Moto 2 is that kind of cesspit that just people go into, and some people don't come back out of it. Eisen Guevara is a perfect example. He was kind of tipped again to be the next guy into GP, and sure, he has gone into Moto 2 now and he's just kind of lost his way slightly. But it's just crazy to watch this talent come through, because it just dawns on me that, like, not everyone is going to get the opportunity to win, and we're going to see guys here that are arguably some of the best ever and not be world champion.
Yeah, I think you could be right with that. I mean, it is like you see these riders sort of come through together. I feel like Marquez sort of came through on his own. There wasn't anybody at Marquez's level that he came through, which I guess explains why he was so dominant. Like, when he turned up, he still had some of the previous riders there to sort of battle with. So to start with, it was a bit more of he was kind of like an additional guy. But then they kind of got older, injured, retired, just slow, I guess, sadly, in one case. And, you know, it kind of left him on his own, because, I mean, at that point, his closest rival was someone also from that previous era that wasn't quite as good as those guys. Dovi, kind of. So, I feel like this could be the next wave coming through. I'm not 100% sure on all of them. Acosta, obviously, definitely. I mean, I believe in Aldeguer because of what he did when he first turned up. I know he did like kind of that half a season where he was sort of replacing Montella the year before and stuff, but, you know, we effectively started off and got that pole position basically straight away in like Termas. But he also seems to be a bit more, he makes more mistakes. I don't know if it makes any sense. He doesn't quite put the races together. he is riding now still like how Pedro kind of was in his first season of Moto2, making the mistakes even though he had the pace, whereas this is like his third or fourth season now in Moto2. I know the tyres have changed, but like again, he's probably been the fastest rider out of all 3 rounds, and he's not picked up a single win yet, kind of. So I'm a little bit not 100% sure on him because he isn't quite delivering on the potential he's shown. I mean, he's still doing a good job, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite that complete package yet, which I guess as a Moto2 rider you're not going to be, but like when we're talking about that kind of level of ride, we're talking about Marquez, Rossi, Lorenzo, Pedrosa, they kind of already were, like they could already kind of, if they were the quickest that weekend, they could win the race kind of thing, whereas I think maybe he's still lacking that a little bit, and he's like still like 19, so he's got plenty of time to learn, don't get me wrong, but that's the only kind of, reservation I have of him. Alonso, yeah, pretty sure he's going to be something special. But again, we have seen riders struggle to go make that change into Moto2, so we will have to see how he gets on with that. But yeah, I think this could be the next sort of crop coming through because they do sort of come. They usually do come in sort of groups. I guess if you look at it, you get the odd one that comes on their own. Like Rossi sort of came on his own, and Marquez sort of came on his own, and they went on these streaks of dominance until the others turned up. And I feel like Marquez didn't quite get that because he got injured. So he never really got dethroned in a way because he won, then he just got injured and wasn't there, and somebody else won. So he didn't really... This has got nothing to do with the point you made now, isn't it? But it's like... I will...
We're still on the Moto3 part, and you're on about how Lorenzo or Marquez got yeah, exactly. Next you'll be saying how Rossi lost the title in 2010, but then, yeah.
See, he was never the same when he came back from the leg injury, But,
yeah.
So I'll wrap up the point. But yes, I agree. I think... Overall, yes, this is probably the next lot that are coming through, and we'll be seeing battling for these MotoGP championships.
Now, my most interesting part of the Pirelli switch from Moto 3 and Moto 2 has been Moto 2 this year for me. It's been just such an interesting change to the class. I've kind of stood by my point that Pirelli in this class has been the biggest change in its lifetime, and again another really interesting race we had today of just ups and downs, riders going forward, going backwards, hand-to-hand combat of the teammates we'll get to later, and again in our notes here we have almost as many notes for Moto 2 as we've done for Moto 3 and MotoGP, which is, there was times in previous years gone by where we'd say something about the opening few laps, we'd say something how it kind of had a lull in the middle, and then we say something about the winner, Pedro Acosta, Arbolino, whatever, whoever it may be. But there's just so much to talk about. There's so much going on. There's so many of these battles in Moto 2. We're going to start off with someone who's been in Moto 2 for quite a while. He's finally got the win off the monkey's back, you could say. Aaron Canet, pole position, finished 9th, got a 410 penalty, cut to chicane, crashed like 6 times and someone stayed on. Did I miss anything? Did he do anything else in the race that I'm forgetting?
I don't think so. I think that's about it. It's a typical Aaron Canet weekend. Isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like,
nice
if
steady for Aaron.
If you kind of just forget last week, you'd be like, oh, it's still that like win on his back. Like, he didn't seem any different.
Nope, not at all.
It was the same. I think, has he been on pole for every race so far this year, or was it Aldeguer on pole in Portimao? I'm not sure. Maybe that's it. He doesn't want to be on pole because it screws him over. Because I'm pretty sure he was on pole in Qatar, right? And he made a terrible start, cooked his tyre coming back through, and went backwards. And he basically did the same thing today, yes, but just didn't come through as well because he was too aggressive, lost time, and what was it? Into like 11. He tried to pass like 2 at once, and he ended up losing like 3 spots or something like that. It was, it didn't quite work out for him. Then he clearly got stuck. Then I think his problem was he kind of got stuck with Agora, because Agora had qualified really badly for some reason. He was like 17th, even though he had way better pace than that. And they kind of met in the middle. And then I think they started taking lumps out of each other. And then, okay, you've ruined your tyre now, which I think he quite clearly did. And they both ruined each other's races almost. They just couldn't get any further up because they just lost so much time and ruined their tyres. Then, yeah, he cut the chicane. We haven't seen it, so I don't know exactly what happened. But he made absolutely no attempt to drop back. So, again, it's not really good look, is it? Yeah, I thought also we were supposed to have got rid of these, like, so many point of a second penalty. Because I remember like Assen last year, Pedro Acosta loses the front end of his bike, by the way, so doesn't go off track on purpose, loses loads of time and a position, goes across the chicane, and then gets a long lap penalty because he went off the track. Whereas here, it's like, well, he straight lined that, gained about 3 seconds or whatever it was. Well, I mean, they obviously calculated how much time he gained. He obviously gained whatever he got the penalty, but he gained a lot. He gained a position as well, and then he just gets like a point 0.3 penalty. When that's, I don't know what happened. Maybe he was avoiding an incident. Maybe he'd gone for a move and it gone wrong. Maybe he lost the front as well. Don't know. We haven't seen it, so you can't really comment. But it just doesn't make any sense. Because I thought the whole point of having the drop one position if you've cut the corner, or have a long lap penalty if you cut the corner, was supposed to get rid of like silly penalties. It just took me back to like 2017, when Rossi got that like 0.3, 0.5 penalty or whatever it was, because like Zarco like sent it on him and he had to pick the bike up. And then like Pedrosa got it on like his pit board that like Rossi had like a 0.5 penalty. Like, how were they like supposed to tell him that? They were trying to tell him, and he was like, I have no idea what they're trying to tell me on the pit board about penalty. I was like, I didn't know if I had a penalty or what. Just very, very strange. It's but then in the end, he does all that, cuts the corner or whatever. He ends up behind the guys he cut the corner to get in front of anyway. So I don't know. So yeah, finished 9th place from pole position. That's how you look at it, regardless of what happened. Yeah, regardless of what happened between the lights and the flag. Aside from the fact that if he'd got nerfed off or something, you'd say, okay, fair enough, wasn't his fault. But he managed to turn a pole position into a 9th place, and as the championship leader, well, not the championship leader anymore, but at the time championship leader, not the best. And as I said earlier, kind of sums up my point. That is Aaron Cannett's Moto2 career written all over. Great up until the race, bottles it in the race, doesn't finish as well, loses points in the championship to somebody else. That could describe probably 50% of the races he's done in Moto2.
Yeah, the rest of them is what he's probably crashed out of.
That's true. He did stay on. That's unlike him.
Yeah, exactly. So these Pirellis are giving us a slightly better Aaron Canet. He was third in qualifying when he won from third on the front row in Portimao, and pole here and pole in Qatar. So it was Manuel Gonzalez who was on pole in Portugal, but your point stands that he has been great over the one laps. Suppose kind of picked up from a messy race again last time out, and let's be honest, it wasn't a lights to flag perfect win for him. It was still, again, he got the win, but you would still think on track there was faster people who had probably issues.
It's what we've said for years, isn't it? You're second for so many times, the leader eventually crashes, and that's exactly what happened. We've said that so many times before, and that's actually what happened. It was always going to be that way.
Yeah, so it was again, he got the win, he deserved it, fair play. This week, pole, we all think, great, surely now because he actually should have won this race 3 years ago, crashed out the lead. Vietti crashed in turn 7, the wind got under his front, blew it out, and then turn 9, I think, kind of just tipped off. I believe that was 2021, memory serves me correct. But
22.
21, 22, one of them races, whatever race season Vietti started strong. In 22, I think. What year are we in? 24? Yeah, probably 22. Yeah. That sounds about right.
It wasn't last year; it's the year before, wasn't it? Because last year was Acosta versus Arbolino, wasn't it? So
yeah, exactly. So
because Arbolino ended up winning the 22 one as well, didn't he? So
yeah, very good, very well remembered. But just again, you thought that it's no slight at Canet that he always has pace, but can't always use it. It's a bit of a trait that he has that he just doesn't always get. He's kind of like Maverick in a way, where like he has this bundle of pace and just drops it everywhere, and you just don't understand where his race went. Again, got a poor start, gets punted wide, has these battles at the start, has all these issues, makes these mistakes, goes for these crazy lunges, and again spins his tyre pretty easy. So whereas probably last year or the years gone by on the Dunlops, he probably crashes out of P6 after making 3 positions back. He now has the tyre to be able to, in terms of be able to perform like he wants to, but doesn't last the race, so he ends up with these kind of weird results where he goes forward and goes backwards. So unfortunately, yeah, another questionable weekend so far for Canet. I could see him doing something similar to Jerez, to be honest. Wouldn't be a major shock. He doesn't seem to learn from these mistakes, which is a bit of an issue for me. just because it's geez, if we're going on how long we've been going on for about it now on the podcast, to the point that like surely
This
someone
is
has to
season
put
3, and he's been
Exactly.
in Moto2 for 5 years, and it's been the same. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure, was it his rookie season where he was on the Aspar speed up and he crashed out of the lead at like Austria. Like it's been happening. It's been happening.
Yeah,
a long
exactly. This isn't an isolated case, but yeah,
No.
surely he needs to just take a step back to go forward. Of course, he's has his ups and downs like everyone, but we again maybe when we go back to the European runs again, Austin's a weird track. Can always kind of take the form book here, so you could probably give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt. But overall, for me, he just needs to kind of settle himself, because I think he has the potential to have a very, very good season. And if there's any chance of getting into the Premier Classroom, it's in the next probably year or two where he might be able to build something to get a seat, maybe like a track of Aprilia, for example. Outside chance, to be honest, because I know he keeps banging on that he's not wanted in GP, but again,
You might need to apply for American citizenship for that one.
yeah, exactly. Maybe there'll be some way around it. I think he can find his way in. But enough with Canet. Great racing early doors. We had, of course, the 2 speed up bikes basically taking lumps out of each other. Again, don't know what Alonso was doing. Basically trying to chop his teammate's leg off, putting him out on the curb. Michael Laverty, who was very neutral and always tries to see the good in things, basically said it was dirty, which you've absolutely pissed right up the street if you've been doing something like that. Like it was just
It's his
like
teammate as well. It's not like
exactly. It's oh my god. Like if I'm team manager there, like he is getting a heavy warning for that, because like fair enough, the track, it does invite that, can you drift back into the zone, but like geez, he's put him on so close onto the curb, and like we've already seen when like again Aldeguer's leg is off the bike down doing the doctor's angle, so like it could have got really messy. And I was just really tense watching that, and I just don't like watching Alonso in battle. He's just the collateral damage is crazy that you'll see, like, and it's just again we're going to see issues throughout the season. We're going to see him collide with people. We're going to be sitting here maybe next time out, or even further down the line, where we're going to be just questioning his racecraft again. No question of his talent. He has a bit of an attitude issue as well. It just doesn't really sit well with me. I don't particularly like the guy, but I can't really deny his talent.
You don't say.
Just a small one. I don't know. I try not to be biased on the podcast, of course.
But to be fair, right, I will give him one. I'll play a bit of devil's advocate. I'll defend him very slightly, right? But he, at this point, he is fighting that guy for the championship. So
I disagree. I don't think he's in the championship. I don't think he's quick enough. I don't think he showed anything in the first 3 races in terms of speed.
okay, but
like,
if you do look at what happened going into this round from his perspective, right, he's won one race and crashed out of the lead of the other. You'd probably consider yourself a championship contender at that point. And
yeah, I can. All right,
yeah,
I can see where he's come from, but I don't think.
But like,
I don't think confidently
it is
he's
his
going to be
teammate,
there.
and it was quite aggressive. But there was no contact, which is pretty rare for Alonso Lopez. So that's he probably considers that a pretty clean pass. There's no contact involved. And
That might be where the issue lies.
Yeah, but at the same time, it is your teammate, and once basically they destroyed their tyres, right, doing that, because they both had to start picking up the bike and stuff to turn it out. We know Pirellis are very fragile. We've seen it in World Superbikes. We've seen it. I know they're not nearly the same, but it's the same company. We've seen it in Formula One. Pirelli tyres, they don't like being pushed very hard. They get worn out pretty quick. That's their stick, isn't it? They make very, very grippy tyres, great lap times, don't last very long. That's their way of making a tyre. It's the opposite of the Dunlop, which is a bit slower but very, very consistent. So they basically destroyed their tyres doing that. Once Aldeguer got past him, just dropped him, Lopez got completely dropped from the group. So basically, in that, yes, I am going to defend him slightly, saying in his defence, it is a race. You're not just going to let someone through. So that there is that. But it was a very aggressive defence of his teammate. But it is someone that, whether you agree or not, he is fighting for a championship within his head, at the very least. I don't know the points exactly. I haven't actually seen them. And obviously they will be different after this race because he lost points to Aldeguer. But Aldeguer didn't score in the first race. Lopez didn't score in the second race, so they would have been pretty similar in terms of points. Lopez would have been slightly ahead, I think. So I think it's slightly more understandable, but again, cost himself and his teammate loads of time because they were pretty close to the guys in front before he started doing that. then they sort of, I think they shot their tyres a little bit. I think potentially he could have cost Aldeguer a win today, maybe. I don't know exactly, but he was there or thereabouts. He did drop at the end, and maybe you could argue that was because he lost the tyre with Lopez, or because he lost the gap and had to push to make it up. One or the other. So, yeah, it was aggressive, but it was good hard racing, and you don't get that in Moto2 sometimes. Sometimes you get a bit of boringness, and like I said, we've had some snooze fests at Austin, right, where there's not been any overtaking. So, it was just about fair. I mean, it was a bit wasn't quite over the line. It was very aggressive, right on the line. Maybe it was a touch over, but I don't think it was anything too bad. He's done a lot worse, let's put it that way. That's my opinion on it anyway.
The only issue I have is the one at the end of the back straight, where he's basically run his teammate onto the curb and given him less than a bike width. That can just get very messy. Everything else was just kind of sticking his nose in, just racecraft, and it was just racing. I have no issue with that. Again, kind of fair enough. You could see, or you could say that he's trying to maybe battle with his teammate to hold him up to maybe cost him points because he sees him as his main rival. But it was a starch reality. When he did clear him, he dropped him like a stone. So at the moment, it does look like we've kind of always had this situation with the two of them, that one of them always is performing, the other isn't. Aldeguer goes missing, Lopez comes to the front, and vice versa. It's rare that they're both on it, and it still looks like, even though they're probably closer, it still looks like that Alonso isn't just there yet, whereas Aldeguer, he just needs to put the weekend together and he'll be winning races. So it's other than that, there was great racing elsewhere on the track. Of course, Canet was making moves and was fighting for the front. There was kind of a good race start from Garcia, so there was these battles everywhere on track, and again, it was just good to see. And I think props for Pirelli, because I think it's definitely changed the class for positive for me. And I think 3 out of 3 podcasts now I've kind of complimented the Pirellis and how they've again, Moto 3 hasn't changed too much. It has added a bit of a tyre drop off at points, but Moto 2 is very tactical now, and I like it because realistically that's exactly what we see in GP. There's no point having a kind of a tyre drop off in GP as severe it is, and then in Moto 2 the class that's below that class is just like, well, we might as well be on bowling balls, are so durable. So it's just overall it seems like it's a better improvement. It brings the classes a bit closer. But moving on to someone who, well, really will want to be getting into the GP class, the Briton Jake Dixon. 0 points out of 75, of course. Didn't make the start in Qatar, wasn't fit for Portimao, crashes out of P4 in Texas. Rhys, championship already over for one of the favourites, or am I getting ahead of myself?
Yeah, I think it's fairly safe to say to an extent, because you're right, it's 0 out of 75. I think had he had a good result today, you could say, yeah, he's still within a shout. I mean, remember 2020, I mean, Lowe's missed the first round and came back and still managed. I mean, no, Dixon already missed the first 2, so that's already double, but he also has a lot more races. There wasn't that many races in 2020 because of COVID, so yeah, obviously it's a little bit of a different situation. But I think if he'd had a decent result today, potentially it could have still been on. Obviously, it does seem like, I know it's kind of an easy thing to point to, but it does seem like all of the KTM Pereira Mobility Group bikes have obviously got the WP suspension. It clearly is a step backwards because they've all struggled, all of them, like all 6 bikes. I mean, to be fair, I didn't really expect much from the Husqvarnas anyway, but the IO team won the championship, like what? That's 3 years, so it's clearly a pedigree team. I mean, you could also look at the Aspar team; they're very pedigree. Jake Dixon was a contender last year for parts of the season, almost got third in the championship, just lost it at the last race to Aldeguer after his amazing run at the end of the season. But again, that was a guy that won the last 4 races in a row. That's what it took to take that bike off of the top 3. So that's still a pretty good season. So it does seem like they have taken a step backwards and maybe not quite got the feeling. And it's worth noting he was miles ahead of his teammate, who is obviously a Moto3 champion. But that's enough defending him, because he has, again, like we were sort of saying with Canet, it's not particularly an uncharacteristic thing to do, crashing out of a decent position after having decent sort of pace. I mean, he looked good in some of the practice sessions, didn't really put it together in qualifying. he actually had a really good start to get up to 4th place as well from 14th on the grid. He'd done the hard part. That was the thing. That's the sort of annoying thing for him. He'd done the hard part. He'd got past people. And even in the Dunlop era, that was hard to do. But now, it's not feasible because the tyres don't last. And that is the one thing I do dislike about the Pirellis. I think the tyre drop-off is a bit too much. I agree that it's good that there's a tyre drop-off now. But I feel like well, I don't want to talk about MotoGP yet, really, but we have seen you can come from 10th and still win, whereas you can't do that in Moto2 because the tyre dies. I think the tyre dies a bit too much in Moto2, potentially, but, that's maybe... I'll let you respond to that in a second, I guess, but back to Dixon, crashed out of the position. I think, yes, probably is out of the championship. One saving grace for him is that as much as Sergio Garcia has been very good these first few rounds, I don't see him being the guy that's going to win the championship. The other championship contenders like Aldeguer, it looks like you want to be on a Bosco Scuro actually for once, and for the first time ever, you don't want to be on a Calex. Well, it looks at it if you look at the championship standings, but the other contenders haven't had the best run at the start of the season either. It's not like last year where if, let's say you're Arbolino and you're trying to fight for the championship and you DNF the first 3 races and it cost us 1 or 3, you're not coming back from that. But this is a field where it's been, and because of the tyre change and how it's all a bit up in the air, you can have a rider that's fantastic finish outside the points of the race because he misjudged the tyre or they didn't get the data or the setup right or whatever. So it is somewhere like you could claw it back in this situation because I think of who is leading and how it's played out. But I think, if you're already out of a possible 75 points, picked up 0, it's now looking how many races can we win this year? Can we try and sort the bike out and then just see where we end up in the championship? I think it probably is over, but it's still somewhat possible just because of the circumstances of the first couple of rounds.
I actually feel a bit sorry for him because he's probably coming into this season, given the change and stuff, it's probably his best chance of winning a title. And with the KTMs, we'll say, all going to the WP suspension, it's just taken that last kind of percent away from him where he was quite good last year and obviously got the victories and stuff, and on his day was capable of being there for the results. So it's just, of course, mistake or mechanical, whatever you want to call it, in Qatar for the crash. Misses Portimao completely. This is his first race weekend. It's not, again, he's up against people who've already raced the Pirellis twice already, so they have that data straight away over him. So maybe he was, again, he's just lacking that information at the moment. And again, I keep saying it, the WP suspension is going to be different. It's going to feel different. It's different to what he's ridden for the last couple of years in the class. So there's just a lot of things at the moment going against Dixon, and the fact he scored 0 out of 75 points is for me is too much to come back, because even if they configure the WP suspension, unless they make it absolutely like out of this world better than the Olins, which I don't believe they can, I don't see him going on a run to take back that many points now. Like, he's only about 51, 52 points back. Obviously, we have had no triple winner to make it 75 points deficit, but in any Grand Prix racing, that's a huge margin, because you're going to have your off days where P6 is your limit and your rivals are 3 seconds up the road from you. So it'd be, if he can turn around from here, it'll be really deserving of a GP spot. So again, I don't know how he's probably feeling himself, because again, turn 1 is very awkward here, and small mistake, penalty didn't fit the crime in the way, because he's again lacking that bit of information from the start of the season. So unfortunately for him, it's just a tough start to the season, and probably again another championship that's probably going to slip through our Britain's riders' hands over the last couple of years in Moto2. Now we're going to move on to our P2 man first. We'll come to Garcia last. Joe Roberts was absolutely incredible all weekend. Had a little bit of a moment in one of the practice sessions where he just looked like maybe he wasn't feeling it. Qualified second row of the grid. And for the American racing team, could he have done better and got that win, Rhys?
Yeah, he could have done if he hadn't have had the neutral, which actually I want to mention because we talk about this every time we get to Texas. Happens every year. It'll happen when we get to the Red Bull Ring as well. I don't understand why we have these street gearboxes in Moto2. I know it's a cost thing, right? It's to do with the cost, but I can't imagine a prototype Calex chassis comes cheap. You know, we're saying we're trying to make this racing somewhat affordable, but it's already not affordable, I would say. So I don't think changing the gearboxes, and also the gearboxes, which is a component supplied by the championship, surely then would subsidise the cost of the championship. I don't really know, but I don't understand why Moto3 you've got race gearboxes, MotoGP you've got race gearboxes, but in Moto2 they use street gearboxes, and I just don't see the point of that in this day and age, because it just causes problems, it causes accidents. It's not what they're going to be riding in the class below. It's not what they're going to be riding in the class above. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Moto3 have them, but I could be wrong on that one. But I just don't understand. I believe, is it to do with the engine? Because it's a street engine? I don't know. You probably know a bit more than me.
It's mainly cost reasons. It was brought in. Moto2 in every sense of the word is to... Towards the end of the 250 era, a highly tuned 250 from Aprilia was top kit and top money, and they wanted to go away from your average team not being able to afford the top stuff from Aprilia, and well, other manufacturers too, but RS GP 250 was like the stuff back in the day. It was a really real fine product, so they probably wanted like less of them kind of. They wanted exactly what they have now, whereas a Calyx you can go buy, a Bosco Score chassis you can go buy, will supply the engine, whatever, and you go racing, and if you can make it work, you can be competitive, whereas it's not as much money related. But I do agree that they should 100% at this point, because like you mentioned Moto3 GP, if you go over to World Superbikes, you ain't going to anything.
Yeah, even Superbikes got better than that. So
like Moto2 just seems so, again, they've always been known as the agricultural kind of, the Moto2 engines were always a bit weird, and just the class itself, I think it needs a bit of a facelift. I think it's just, at the moment, it's just outdated.
It needs aero, Dill. That's what it needs.
That's the last thing it needs. But yeah, the fact that we've upgraded tyres, we got a nice upgrade a couple of years ago with the engines going to the 765 from Triumph. I think, again, it would tie in nicely now if we brought in some race boxes, and we just overall tidy up the sport. And again, we'll get rid of these haunting neutrals that we have once every 6 months, really.
Yeah, it's all you need. It's just put neutral at the bottom, put gate. I don't know how expensive that is to do, but it can't be that bad, right? I don't.
In a race box, it's not as easy as that, because they're the way a race box, or sorry, a road box.
It's a street box already, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the street one is much more difficult to, because it just doesn't have the tech, we'll say. And a street box is very basic, so you end up having these. All it is it's not even a false neutral. You're going past neutral, and a slight mistake from the rider after 34 minutes on the bike, you can easily just go down slightly into neutral. Everybody's done on a bike where they're trying to go down into first at a traffic light, and they've gone into neutral, left out the clutch, and you go nowhere. Feel like a bit of a tool, but yeah, it's one of those things where a bit more money spent on the class, and we'd have proper gearboxes, and we wouldn't have these issues. And it's been an issue as long as the sun has been coming up, really. So unfortunately, it is something, again, Triumph have tried technology to kind of get around it, again, without going too technical. It's just give us race boxes and be done with it, really.
Yeah, that's definitely my thought. But anyway, back to the actual point, Joe Roberts. Yes, I think without that he could have won, but at the same time, I did think whilst we're going on about that, it clearly happened to Garcia twice as well. So, you know, I don't think he lost as much time because he didn't actually run off the track, so he only lost a few tenths, whereas obviously Roberts went pretty wide at turn 12, so he would have lost a good second or two, so it could have been a bit different. But I think really his best moment of the weekend was that, was it FP? Well, no, actually, it wouldn't be FP, it wasn't a free practice session. Practice 2, I guess it was. Don't know the session names anymore. They made it way too confusing.
Yeah.
But where he was outside of the top 14 that you need to be in to go through, and he just crashed as well, going for the lap to try and get in. They managed to repair the bike. He had 2 flying laps to go and do it, and he did it. He got through, put him through to Q2, qualifies on the front row then in Q2, and that's where his weekend turned around. Now, sure, if you've got the pace, you can probably get through Q1 anyway. We've seen it happen many times. If you're a good rider, it will probably happen. But you never know. You could get a yellow flag. You don't know the circumstance that could happen. You could end up not getting through to Q2 for whatever reason. You could touch the green by accident. Easily done. Especially at this track. It's the first time we've had track limits be an issue again, was at this circuit. And it was only really the odd couple of corners, but we haven't really had to worry about that this season. But this was the first time they kind of had to worry about that again. Obviously with the track limit stuff. And yeah, like my point was that that lap really clutched it, because something bad could happen in Q1, stop you getting through. That's it, weekend over. Like I said, with the Pirellis, you can't come from the back. Not that I think you really could probably do it with the Dunlops that well either. It's Moto2, it's a very difficult class, but he wasn't going to get a podium from back on like 20th of the grid or whatever. So that really turned it round. Started on the front row, gave himself a great position, and he managed to sort of deliver the American podium at last. Beaubier was so close a couple of years ago. He also... Was he actually on pole, I think, right? He literally was on pole.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, because he had the lap record, I think, didn't he, before they destroyed it with the Pirellis this weekend and the resurfacing. But he fell off on the last lap out of a podium, I'm pretty sure. So that was heartbreaking for them. And Roberts was so close to the win, but Garcia just had him covered off. And I think, to be honest, I was actually surprised by how high up in the championship Joe Roberts was coming into this race. I had no idea he was second in the championship. I don't know about you, but because I kind of remember him being really quick, like in testing, being really quick in the first few pre-practices in Qatar, then qualifying not very well and just disappearing. But he must have finished somewhat decently in Qatar as well, and I just didn't realise. Then obviously he finished second in Portimao, he's finished second again here. Unfortunately for him, because of Garcia's results, he's actually leapfrogged ahead of him again in the championship. So even though he's beat Canet by a decent amount, he's not actually took the lead of the championship. But after 3 rounds, second in the championship, that's much better than I expected Joe Roberts to be doing this year, it must be said. And with all these, the Liberty Media sort of stuff, which obviously we haven't talked about yet, but obviously they've sort of been confirmed that they've bought a controlling stake in Dorna and therefore MotoGP. And like all this American hype at the moment and Trackhouse coming in, it's kind of all lining up for him maybe to end up in MotoGP. It was something that should have probably happened a few years ago. He turned it down, and I think it was the correct decision, even though it turned out maybe that the bike was better than we all thought. At the time, he made the right decision, but it could be coming back around for him again. And the result like that is kind of the result you need. You're doing well, you're doing it at home under all the pressure, the Star Spangled Banner, the special livery, all of that stuff. And, compared to where that team was last year, I mean, they were in the doldrums last year, with especially at the start with Skinner and Dylan Kelly. They could barely score a point, let alone a podium. And they had 2 bikes in the top 5 today, so... Yeah, great for the team, great for Roberts, and I really hope he could kick on, because he's a nice guy. I mean, everyone's a nice guy, most in the paddock, right? I like most of the riders, but Joe Roberts really does seem like a nice chap, and he's always shown flashes of brilliance. He's had the odd race in a season where he's done well. Obviously, he's won that one race at Portimao. We still think that's a bit of a weird one. Catalunya was the one he should have won that time when he crashed out of like a 2-second lead or whatever it was. But it's a shame for him that he didn't win today, but... Second place, still great, valuable points for the championship, and I'm sure he'll sort of roll that on into Jerez, where I have a feeling that he struggled at previously, but I guess we'll see. He seems to be happy on the American racing Calex again, and maybe these Pirellis suit him a little bit better. It probably does suit that smoother riding style, because you're not chewing up the tyres on the corner exit, so it probably does. It almost maybe does bring it a bit more towards how it used to be pre-Triumph again, that you've got to carry more corner speed than V-off a little bit more because the tyres are a bit more fragile.
It is an interesting one, and again, I think Roberts, has been one of the big winners from the Dunlop Pirelli switches, so long may it last. I completely agree that the Liberty Media purchase Trackhouse in GP and his turn of form, as well as Aprilia wanted him a couple of years ago, I think it's all building for an American back in the Premier class, which is great, because Joe Roberts again, you mentioned you don't dislike many people, but there's not many people you like more, and to be fair, Joe Roberts is one of those guys, always seems positive and happy. It reminds me a bit of the later of the late career of his team boss John Hopkins, where he's constantly has a positive spin on it. Everything, he'll turn everything into a positive, and he has that kind of strong mentality. And again, very passionate American. So it would be good to get him back get an American back in the class, because we have one now since it would have been Spies, I suppose, back in. I know he signed for Prap. Oh, Hayden wildcard, I suppose.
How did you of all people forget Hayden?
Well.
Not even the wild card, because he was around a lot longer after Spies on the open bike, wasn't he? So,
but am I wrong in saying Spies came back after Hayden had left to sign with Pramac, but then pulled out with his shoulder?
No, that was like 13.
Was that before?
Yeah, because Hayden was still around. I think Hayden's
14.
last season was 15, wasn't it? His last race 15? Was the Valencia, because I remember.
The Rossi.
He went to Superbikes. in 16. Obviously managed to win.
Sepang.
Was in Sepang, and then he came back and did the wild card. Not the wild card, the stand-in for, I guess it was Pedrosa at the time. I think he also did one for Miller at Aragon, so he did a couple of stand-in rides, and then obviously 17 was the year that he unfortunately passed away. So, yeah, so Hayden would have been the last one, I guess, in 16. I guess 15 if you say full time.
Yeah,
I suppose that would be the fair one to say. And even at that point, he was not really on a competitive bike.
Yeah, he was basically already on Superbike at that point. So we're talking almost 10 years since we've had an American in the Premier class. So I think it is well overdue that we get. I know Beaubier was brought over the Moto2 to kind of maybe have a stab at getting into the class. Showed promise.
Stayed. I really wish he'd stayed.
I do too. I don't think he would have made it.
I don't know. He was really putting it together. I think last year he could have had a good season. I think he could have had a good one last year.
I would like to see him on the Pirellis. I'd like to see him in the class now. But again, homesick a bit, didn't want to travel around the world and all that, and that's
he took a punt and it didn't quite work out for him, and you've got to respect that because he could have easily stayed on the Yamaha in America, winning every season, earning millions, whatever, because they pay a lot over there. But you know, he took a punt, went for it, and you can't blame a guy for trying. Always exactly, for that.
So he tried it, and again, it was building towards something when he kind of pulled the plug of his own accord, which is, I suppose, it's probably nice that he had the opportunity to do it, and he could go out on his own terms and go back to America and keep racing at a high level over there. But to kind of finish up with Joe Roberts, I do think maybe, judging by the contracts, it'll probably 26 before we see him on the grid. I don't think next year it'll work for him. Depending on, like for me, it has to be Trackhouse, just that connection, the American flag all over the bike today, and just the whole Liberty Media.
Were almost the same, weren't they, today?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, I do like what was it, Indy 08 that Hayden had, or was it Laguna? One of the American races where Hayden was full stripes and flag the whole down the bike was pretty cool on the GP 08.
Well, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah, so he's done a few. So again, it's one of those. It's kind of a simple flag, the stars, the stripes, and the colours, but put on a motorbike and it really comes alive. So, in fairness to him, it was well deserved again. And again, come back to today's race, I kind of agree. If he doesn't have his moment, you say Garcia doesn't have his moment, and it probably evens it out. It's probably half with 12, that kind of wave. Really, you're going, well, it's going to go that way if it goes that way. So I think the damage was done middle race where he just didn't have the speed, or Garcia maybe he was saving a bit, and then when the mistake came, it was kind of too much. But he did so well to get back onto the back wheel of Aldeguer, make that beautiful overtake into the ultimate corner, and then just kind of make it interesting for the last few laps. But our race winner, Sergio Garcia, runner-up in Moto 3 to Eisen Guevara, someone who was absolutely nowhere today. Garcia has jumped into Moto 2, has been a very, very interesting prospect for me, because he's one of those riders, he's come through, we've all known his talent, he's not been Pedro Acosta hype, he's not been Aldeguer hype, but he's gone about his business pretty quietly, small little rider, and on a Moto 2 bike, you think maybe it's just not really the class for him. We've seen Foggia struggle again. Not a good ride from him today, in fairness. So
he was really
shout out to him.
Up out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So in fairness, shout out to Foggia. But there are these some riders that you just don't expect to do very well in this class. And in fairness, Garcia had a good season last year, and this year he's leading the championship, race winner in Kota, a place he's never scored points ever before. Fun fact,
really?
If you.
Wow,
yep.
That is a good start.
Saw that somewhere today. I hope it's right. But yeah, Sergio Garcia, I tip my hat to him. Brilliant start, brilliant race. Obviously had a couple of mistakes into turn 9, 10, 11, whatever the hairpin is.
It's 11, isn't it?
11.
It's the one at the end of the straight.
So yeah, a couple of mistakes there, but he was really, overall, just absolutely bulletproof.
Yeah, I mean, he's been phenomenal. I mean, I was really impressed with him last year, to be honest. I can't lie. He had some... I mean, even early on in the season, I think... Argentina was wet, right, I think, last year.
Yep.
And I seem to remember he would finish like P6 there or something. Or he was at least running
he was there
very
in the
well
group, yeah,
for a while.
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if he then maybe dropped back, but that was when you're like, wow, it's like his second race in like Moto2. He's doing really well. And he popped up a couple of other times. Did he get a podium last year? I don't think he did he? No, I think...
No, he didn't have one as of today.
One. But I feel like he finished fourth, right, at some point. He was close to a podium at some point last year, I seem to remember. He was there or thereabouts. He was definitely the best rookie last year, without a shadow of a doubt. He completely outclassed Guevara and Foggia. Now, Foggia I kind of expected to struggle a little bit in Moto2 just because he's so small, kind of a bit Dalaporta sort of style, like, not really working for him, and it seems to have worked for him today at least anyway, which is nice. I kind of expected Guevara to struggle in his first season because he seems like a bit of a Marini type. He needs a year or so to build up. But I didn't, so I didn't expect. Like, it wasn't too big of a surprise, I guess, to see Garcia beat those guys. But the amount he beat them by, and how consistent he was, and how close he was to Canet, who was a very experienced teammate last year, and then this year, he's hit the ground running. He came from like nowhere to like that podium in Qatar, like beating his more experienced teammate Agora, fighting right up there with the other Boscoscuros. Now, I must say, the Boscoscuro seems to have just been loving these Pirelli tyres. It absolutely loves it, because all four of them are there week in, week out, competitive in some sessions. All right, okay, maybe Agora wasn't great today, but he answered the damage he's done in qualifying, quite frankly, and that's a bit of an Agora trait, unfortunately, over the last couple of years. But, we'll talk about Garcia here, so let's not get onto his teammate, but I didn't expect him to be leading the championship. I would never have thought for a minute that he'd be leading the championship. If you told me that he was going to win a race this year, I'd probably believe you. I'd probably like, yeah, he had a pretty good rookie season. I could see it being a bit of a weird race, or like the Bosco is working really well at this track and he's sort of qualified well or gets a bit lucky or whatever. But that's 2 podiums out of 3. I'm not sure where he finished in Portimao, but it wasn't. Well, it must have not been too bad because he's leading the championship, but it wasn't too bad. It was somewhat decent. So, yeah, really, really is building himself up to be. I don't really believe at this point that he will be a championship contender come the end of the season. He'll probably be sort of. It's a bit of a Baldassarri kind of thing. I don't think his season will go off like Baldassarri's did, but the Vietti kind where like you have a first few good rounds because the races are a bit weird. Usually it's the flyaways that make it weird. Now I think it's the tyres that are making it weird. I think there'll be a massive change after Jerez, I think, once they start to correlate some more data. But yeah, I don't think he'll probably be actually winning the championship this year, but even still, fantastic ride. I mean, the race was great. I mean, he won from the front. He took the lead at the start, didn't he? It was a really, really good start, very aggressive. And yeah, he just likes to flag victory. Had a bit of pressure from behind. Obviously, the riders behind made some mistakes, but Joe Roberts was really fast today. And to bring it on home like that, I wouldn't have expected it. Like I said, I probably would have believed if he said he won a race this year, because I think he had it in him based on last season's performance, and I definitely wouldn't have been surprised to see him on the podium semi-regularly. But to see 2 out of 3 races podium, one of them being a win, beating his teammate, being the top Boscoscuro, the Boscoscuro being this good, would never have thought that. So hats off to Garcia, because I'm really happy to see it, because I've always sort of thought he was quite a good rider. I always remember one of the Austria races in 2021, because obviously there were several, but there's one where I don't know if that was a bit wet actually now.
It was, yeah.
Him and Acosta like miles ahead of everybody, and he like sent it on Acosta as like the penultimate turn, like fell off, got back on and still finished second. I'll always remember that. Like, so when you're going toe to toe with Acosta, you've got to be a pretty good rider. Like, he definitely surprised me that season, and I would have actually expected him to beat Guevara after the first few rounds of the season that Guevara won it, because it looked like Garcia was the man, but Guevara got himself together and ended up beating him. But the talent's been evident since the beginning. Great season last year. Looks like it's going to be an even better one this year. Now, don't get too carried away first few rounds. We've seen this many times before, but still, hats off to the guy, and I hope he continues this run of form. It would be great to see a new team, effectively. I guess it's kind of like the Pons team, I guess they've sort of bought, and I guess most of the staff is probably still the same. I don't know that, but that's the team they've replaced. But even still, new team, they're literally their third race in Moto2, and they've already won a race. And even if you do say it's some of the same staff from the existing team that they've purchased, that's still a new bike to that team. They never used speed-ups in like the years that they were going. So, yeah, fantastic. Or Bosco Scuro, I guess you should say, but same thing.
So the Premier Class news started before the weekend even got underway. A certain Fabio Quartararo staying put surprised to many people in the paddock and signing another couple of years with Yamaha and becoming the most paid man in the class at the moment, turning down what believed was a $4 million deal at Aprilia. Rhys, did we ever think he was going to leave? Was it a shock he stayed? What was your thoughts when you heard the news a couple of days ago?
I was a little bit shocked. I thought that he was shopping around. It sounded like he was shopping around, and that there was potentially a move to Aprilia on the table. And as it's turned out, basically that seems to have been the truth. But I don't know. I still sort of believe that the noises that he's sort of been coming out with since sort of pre-season stuff and the end of last year have been a bit more positive, and that he seems to believe that there's a change going on in Yamaha. They've hired a lot of new staff, got rid of a lot of the old ones. Also worth noting, I don't think this is why they've dropped down, by the way. I don't think this guy's had anything to do with it, but since we're talking about Yamaha staff changes, Lynn Jarvis, it's been announced this weekend, it's his last season in Motogp, which is a bit of a historic end, because, I mean, he's been in charge of Yamaha for longer than I've been alive. Like, you know, he's been in charge of the Yamaha MotoGP team since before I was born, so that's how crazy it is. Like, he was there during, like, the rainy era, wasn't he? Like, even so, he's been there a long time. It's a very, very legendary figure. So I thought I'd just mention that whilst we're talking about Yamaha staff changes. But it sounds like they've made some changes. They've got a European project lead, I think, for the first time in their history, and they finally have delivered with a bit of a better engine. Doesn't seem to have done them any good, which is what Dovi, Rossi, Viñales, probably Lorenzo were saying the entire time. So, you know, those guys never won anything, have they? No point listening to them. But they've always said the problem was rear grip, and I think that's kind of what they've realised now, and the aero and stuff like that. Obviously, they've got the concessions now. Yes, you can sit there and say, oh, that's made no difference, but it's not going to make a difference right away. It's going to take years. I mean, remember the old concession system when you come in, you have the likes of KTM coming in, Aprilia coming in. It took them years to get competitive, and they had a huge advantage, absolutely huge, the amount of stuff they could do. And it's even more now that I think like they're even more restrictive for the teams that don't have the concessions or don't have the lower tiers. So I think we will start to see some change, but it's going to be at least a year. And I guess he believes in that project that they've sort of put towards him. And I don't know, my opinion's kind of changed it a bit, because when it first came out, I was like, okay, he probably believes in what they've said. You know, Yamaha have won so many championships before, so clearly the team and operationally they're able to do it. And, you know, they've offered him a very, very, very large paycheck from what we've heard. Significantly more than what Aprilia have offered. Now, obviously, if you want to win a championship, that doesn't really come into it. Marc Marquez has kind of shown that. He basically is riding... I don't know if he's riding for free, but it's going to be a very low salary compared to what he was on at Repsol Honda. But if you want to win, you've got to take those sacrifices. But, you know, maybe as a younger rider, that does have a bit of an influence. But also at the same time, I kind of argued, like when the news came out, that Aprilia is unproven. Yes, they sort of won that one championship kind of run with Aleix, but that was a strange season. Like, Bagnaia should have dominated in that. No one should have been anywhere near Bagnaia because he had such a poor start to the season. It made it close, and Fabio Quartararo had such a bad second half of the season. Kind of made it close, but other than that, they're kind of there one weekend. They're not another. I mean, let's cast our minds back to last weekend. Fantastic, they won the sprint race, and then the bikes let the lead rider down again and thrown him off out of a really good position, and then they go missing, and everyone except Aleix is lost in Qatar, but then Aleix is also lost in the Qatar main race, and then now Viñales is the one that's doing well. They've kind of been very up and down. So I've been like, yes, the bike is better, but it's still unproven. And if Yamaha build a good bike, you know it'll probably be a good bike at every track. Whereas the Aprilia seems to be like, it's only good at some tracks, or it's here and there. But almost this weekend I've changed my mind, because it's like, well, the Aprilia's just dominated this weekend effectively. The Yamaha was nowhere. I think it's kind of a bit of a stark contrast. The Yamaha was terrible this weekend, so was the Honda. Even though I actually thought that they would be okay, because last year they did pretty well. I think the Yamaha was on the podium here last year. Well, I think you'd have needed about 15 riders to fall off for him to be on the podium this weekend. So, yeah, I think it's a difficult one, because that was really the only realistic option, was to move to Aprilia. And rightly or wrongly, maybe he's decided against that. Maybe that's a financial reason. Obviously, having the faith in Yamaha delivered him a championship, took a punt on him in the first place. So there is that. Maybe there's a little bit of loyalty there. But I think if a Ducati offers on the table, he'd probably jump ship for that, because immediately it's going to be an upgrade. But then it's an unknown. So I don't really know if he's made the right decision or not. I guess time will tell. You're signing for 2 years. I think the new regulations will be quite crucial. I think that will help Yamaha out a lot if they're curbing the aero, because the Yamaha bike will still be better than everybody else's. So that might actually help, but I guess it remains to be seen whether it works out for him. At least the Yamaha isn't injuring him. It might be a bit slow, but he's picking up a paycheck and not picking up broken bones, unlike the other Japanese manufacturer, which is even slower and much more painful to ride by the looks of it.
Yeah, the big thing about the Yamaha kind of ordeal we've had at the moment with Fabio is that you kind of touched on it at the start of your point there a minute ago, that it was, for me, maybe not as far back as pre-season, but definitely since around the whole contract has been revealed that he's signed for what we believe to be about 12 million euros. It's just that there's so much going on behind the scenes that we don't know yet, is what he's kind of said. That he said there's so much change, and what he has seen himself has given him faith. Now, I 100% agree. It's up until the regulation changes in a couple of years' time is where Yamaha will be. You're not going to turn it around in that space of time in my eyes. They've been probably lacking. Even the year he won the championship, he kind of made the difference. The year after, when Pecco won his first, he was the one making the difference. What was the last year that two Yamahas were really strong? Like probably when Valentino's in the factory team, and so you're going back to 2018, maybe 2017, 18, 19, where the factory bikes were consistently. And if you go that far back, you're not back as far as there's only 4 bikes that could win race, but you're like, Aprilia's weren't winning races, Suzuki's weren't winning many races then. They'd pick up the odd win a season. They might go a year and a half, 2 years without a win. It was mainly the Repsol Hondas, the factory Yamahas, and then the odd Ducati win. So it's kind of a different era win now. So for the whole Yamaha situation, I think when we get to the rule changes, if we lose the right height devices, which I believe we are going to under some sort of safety argument, the aero is harming everything. So that'll probably somehow go as well. And if we go back to maybe an engine change, well, that might change it up in terms of just the whole order of field at the moment. But I think if you take away all the modern gizmos, Honda and Yamaha just fly back up, and you probably see the likes of KTM and maybe Aprilia just fall back again into the clutches of the top 10, top 15. Like Aprilia's big advantage is their aero fairing. They already have these amazing airflow channels under the bike that pulls them into the corner. If you both make them basically have a standard fairing gate, they probably are back near where Yamaha are. Like, so it's a bit of a conundrum at the moment, the way the sport is. So I'd imagine Fabio's taking a punt for a couple of years' time. I don't believe that next year he thinks he'll be world champion or that he can win races this year. I think he knows that he's going to get a nice paycheck for the next 18 months, and come the new rules, he might be hoping that that's where his decision has been paid off for. I think it's kind of fitting as well that he'll be giving them basically that season as like, well, we've worked towards this. If you can't give me a bike that I'm at least competitive on, I'll probably jump ship to whoever is most competitive, because I don't think anyone in the paddock really questions if Fabio Quartararo is one of the best riders. I think he is, in my eyes, right now. We're going to take Pedro because he's a rookie. I think he's only second in terms of ability to Marquez. And even at that now, I'm starting to wonder, is Marquez maybe not the Marquez that we think he is anymore? So is Fabio the outright fastest man in the paddock, just on such a dog of a machine? We just don't get to see it from week to week. So there'll be no question, if 26 rolls around and Yamaha drop the ball, every team will want Fabio Quartararo's signature. It'll be kind of similar to when Marquez kind of made the rumours that he was about to leave Honda. Everyone will try and get that signature on paper. So again, he's going to get a big paycheck for the next couple of years, and from there we'll hope to see him back towards the front. But jumping into the race weekend in Texas, it's a bit of a long point we're going to get you here, because there's so many things that happen in the sprint race, the main race. We're going to start with everybody's new favourite DC superhero, Batmav. Rhys, Batmav, has he been on your wall since you were a young child?
He is all. I have been representing him since the podcast started. I've been saying since 2020. Well, I've been saying for years before the podcast, but since the first season of the podcast, I've been saying Vinales is going to win this weekend. It's really good, and then he disappoints me. And then now 2 weekends in a row, he's won races. He's finally won a main race, first rider in Motogp history. Motogp history, by the way. Obviously, it happened in the 500s. It's a different era, but to win on 3 different manufacturers, which really does show how talented a rider he is. Now, is kind of ironic that the three bikes make up the lap time in a very similar way, so I guess it kind of suits his riding style as well. But yes, I've been repping him for ages. I've been a fan of Maverick Vinales since he was in Moto3, so he really is one of my guys that I've followed through. Like, I guess technically I sort of followed Marquez through in terms of like seeing someone go from like the lower class to winning races in the top class would have been the first rider I properly like sort of saw that progression of. But Vinales was the first rider I really followed the whole way through, was a fan of. Like if there was, when I was like 11 or whatever, if there was like Maverick Vinales like little model bike that you could buy of his Moto3 bike, I'd have been buying that. And like I remember like buying like Motogp 13 or whatever, and I was excited to play as Vinales, not as Rossi. Like, you know, Rossi was like my favourite rider ever, but I've played as him for years on the other games. This is the first time I could play as this Vinales guy that I was a massive fan of. So like, you know, like genuinely, I really love Vinales. Like, I really am a massive fan of Vinales. You know, no bias, of course, but you know, I'm a big fan of him. So I'm so happy to see him win. Obviously, to see him win in the sprint race, it was like, yes, finally he's sort of got that duck off his back a little bit. He's finally won a sprint race. Okay, it took the leader making a mistake for it to happen, but he kept the rest of them behind. And I think I was saying last week, I was optimistic that he was aggressive in those opening laps as well. Obviously, then he wins the sprint race. Obviously, he has the issue in Portimao with the bike. That wasn't his fault, but again, it was looking like a good result. Comes here, pole position, looks fast all weekend. Sprint race, like pretty aggressive into the first corner. Just lights the flag, win. So another sprint race win, fantastic. Then it gets to the main race. We knew he was going to get sat up into turn one because of the way he'd won the race the day before. They weren't going to let that happen again. There was no way that they were going to let that happen again. And we've seen this happen with Vinales so many times. We've seen him lights the flag victories and it's like, that's great. And then next weekend he qualifies well again and Marquez is like, all right, we're going to pick you up, mate. It's not happening again. Because like it was quite nice to see those two sort of like running first and second. It's almost like the old guard, like the sort of the last kind of era, like the mid 2010s kind of riders that were like mid to late 2010s. Whereas I feel like your Martins, your Bagnaiyas, your Quartararos, these are more like the 2020s like riders. That makes sense. So like it's nice to see some of the older riders battling at the front for the wins again, like we've seen in the past. It's nice to sort of look back on that. But yeah, obviously we knew he was going to get picked up. Got punted off the track by, I think it was Martin picking up Bagnaia, who then picked up Vinales. And I think Vinales reckons he had a clutch problem, so I think that's why he'd also got a bit swamped on the run into turn one. But he dropped that down to like 11th. That is it. That is it. I said, well, Vinales doesn't win this race at that point. Like, we've seen this happen many times. He gets beat up and he doesn't get anywhere. But then he starts overtaking people. Some really, really good passes, aggressive, clinical passes. Reminds me a little bit of what we saw at Le Mans last year from him. And obviously what we saw in the Portimao sprint race. But every pass, it was great. Like he messed a couple of them up, ran a bit wide, but came straight back at him. Even when he got blasted back on the straight by Bagnaia, went back at him. Wasn't scared to go, you know, try and outbrake Pedro Acosta. I mean, I know Pedro Acosta's a rookie, so it's not like you're going to be scared of a rookie, but he was so good on the brakes in every round we've seen so far, so to try and level him on the brakes is great. And just the way he came through and you just saw him ghosting up, it was like a different rider. I know everyone keeps saying this and it's a bit cliche to say, but he never did this before. He could never do this. This is the first time I've seen him genuinely come through and make passes since 2017. That's like I think Qatar 17. Was he on pole? Did he get beat up by a couple of riders? I seem to remember into like the left-hander before the sort of the curved straight at Qatar. Stuffs it underneath Dovi, and that was it. I think race over. He'd won that at that point. And that was the last time I saw him drop back a little bit and actually make passes on people and take the lead and win. That was 7 years ago. 7 years ago. When he first jumped on that Yamaha, before it all imploded, when it looked like Vinales was going to be a world champion. And that's who we finally saw again. He's been on a long holiday, but maybe he's finally back. We'll have to see, because again, it's only been a couple of rounds. We have seen, you know, little purple patches from him. I know 2019, he had a few rounds where he was really good. Looked like he could challenge Marquez and stuff, but yeah, just it was a phenomenal ride. He didn't put a foot wrong aside from the start, maybe. But it was fantastic. I thought at one point Acosta was going to catch him up again, but yeah, enough sort of, you know, gushing over Vinales, I guess, how good he is. But it was a great weekend, a great couple of weekends for him, and that's propelled him up to a really good position in the championship now. And he'd be sitting pretty if it wasn't for Aprilia's poor engineering in the last round, which that's another reason I forgot to mention before with Quattraro. Well, I think I did sort of mention it, but the bike is pretty unreliable, so there is that as well. You might be able to run for a championship on it, but it will break down on you a couple of times, which is not great.
All right, I'm going to ask you one question about Maverick. I want a somewhat quick answer because I don't have all night. Can he win the title?
No.
And when you answer it, throw it back to me and I'll tell you why he can't.
No, I don't think so.
Give me with the reasoning, just quickly the reasoning, because I have
because he just isn't consistent enough, and he's also not on a Ducati. I don't think you can win the championship on a bike that's not a Ducati at the moment.
For me, the reason he can't win the championship is the reason he hasn't won the last 4 races. No matter how good Maverick is this year, he's still on Aprilia. It's going to let him down.
Yeah,
So everybody sees the Portimao main race crash. Nobody sees that he was losing 0.3 in the first sector every lap to Martin and gaining it back by the end of the lap, and then pulling him in the rest of the lap to the point where he'd gain over the lap. So whatever issues he was having throughout that race, bar the mechanical at the end, that's another guaranteed win in my eyes. I think Jorge Martin sees Maverick as alright. It's probably what Pecco sees Binder as last year, where it's like, you can take points off me. If it keeps going on, I'll have to kind of settle you down a bit. But for now, 5 points to you isn't a disaster. I'm more focused on Pecco, Marquez, blah blah blah. So
Pecco was focused.
I think, yeah, Pecco's. I don't even know if we'll cover Pecco today because he's just so confusing. I don't even know what to say about Pecco.
It's pretty slow.
In terms of Maverick, yeah, exactly. For me, with Maverick, regardless if he doesn't keep up this form or he does, I think the Aprilia lets him know more often than that. Let's not forget his first ever potential podium on this bike was let down by mechanical in Germany.
Right,
yes,
device,
so
we're in agreement on that. Then it's the Aprilia is the main issue.
Yeah. So again, in the highly unlikely chance, it's like when you're going to play, and the highly unlikely chance we have some issues today. The highly unlikely chance that Maverick sorts himself out properly and it isn't just kind of riding the crest of a purple patch. I still think the Aprilia leaves down in the same way it let Alessia down in 22. So yeah. Moving swiftly on from Batmav to more Japanese misery. Honda, one of the greatest manufacturers ever to grace sport MotoGP. Probably the greatest, yeah. You'd question, can Ducati over the next kind of decade or two make a state to be the modern day great? But
I still see it differently.
Honda,
I think their bike isn't as good. The actual bike, not the aero.
Oh, okay. You're anti-aero.
I'm not anti-aero, but I feel like it's an engineering feat to make really good aero, and it's fantastic. But as a mechanical bike feat, that's where Honda shine, in my opinion, and Yamaha as well. They make good bikes. Okay,
I'm not going to make you look silly, so we're going to move on. Why has Honda been so miserable over the last... Basically, what I was going to say is it not engineers who make the rest of the bike too? It does. It doesn't matter. We're not going to get plugged on.
You know the point I'm trying to make. Yes, the bike at the moment isn't probably that great either. But like, if you stripped all the aero off, they'd suddenly be a lot better. You know.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe. I'd like to see that. To be honest, I'd like to see. Like,
I think Fabio Quartararo would like to see that. To be honest, I mean, they wouldn't see which way he'd gone.
Yeah. Honda. The sprint all 4 crash.
I think Marini finished, didn't he?
Okay, so sprint and main race, Marini, the only survivor of the Titanic that is Honda at the moment. Yeah, what do we want to even say about Honda? What has been said that we already haven't mentioned before, Rhys? Is there any extra devastating news about Honda that we haven't mentioned before?
Well, the only sort of other thing I want to say about it is at pre-season, they were really happy. Zarco was like, yeah, this bike's easily 0.7 quicker than the other one. Qatar, they were actually relatively surprised that they were better than the Yamaha. But since then, they've been worse than the Yamaha quite comfortably. And it started throwing them all off again. So, yeah. Even, you made reference earlier that about Marquez not being the Marquez that he was before. But he definitely made the right call jumping off the bike. I know there was some people saying, the Honda might be a bit good this year. But it's not. So... not a lot more to say. I think it just shows how hard that they're trying, that they're still crashing out of like last place. I think I don't mean to say it in a bad way, but Marini is a lot off the other Hondas in terms of pace. That's probably why he's finishing.
He's also Marini. That is his.
Yeah, he will ride at 95% to stay on the bike, than push at 110 and crash. And
to be honest, I actually like that he has that in his locker, that he can finish it.
Like, if you're trying to develop a bike, you need to finish the race. There's no point crashing like on lap 5 every race, Charmier.
Stefan Bradl.
Yeah. Well, again,
we both went
there is an issue there.
We went
yeah, there is definitely an issue with the rider that they have employed as the test rider. No slight on Stefan Bradl, but he's not as fast or as good as a test rider as all of the other test riders. Well, he might be faster than Pirro, but Pirro's obviously quite a good test rider.
I wouldn't even say he's faster than Pirro, but anyway, funnily enough, apparently they got rejected by they went and tried to get Sylvain and Gintoli, and they lost out to BMW. So that says all you need to know. Even Sylvain doesn't want to touch that. So, I saw a little interview as well with GP1 from, must have been after the sprint. Yeah, it was after the sprint. It was of Mir looking very sad and depressed and just dejected in all of his, every ounce of his body.
Announced they're pulling out, he's looked like that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. He's looked like he's a bit of a cold sweat going to constant, but basically said that once again, we've gone the wrong way. We're a bit lost. Was kind of the main snippets. And like, again, you mentioned how we all thought that they took the Marquez money, thrown it back into it. They changed this. Oh, so much better front end feel. This bike's so much better. And in fairness, Mir's crashed it less, but he still crashed it over.
He started crashing more again.
Yeah, exactly. I think he
finished both races at Qatar, didn't he? It's like, wow, this is a lot better.
Yeah,
it's weird. Why
no, he still crashed in the sprint.
Well, there you go. Then.
Last corner.
But the Honda seems to turn up sometimes at Qatar really well. I remember Polo Spagro. Guys, his bike's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been. I'd have won if I didn't brake too late for turn 1.
Yeah. Again, we've gone to Portimao was a bit of a normal track, but we usually have Termas there, so we're kind of getting out of the part now where we're like, we've gone to the weird tracks.
It should have at least been good at Texas, though. That's the problem. It was at least good there.
Yeah, exactly.
The last year's bike was terrible, and as Marquez said, it wasn't terrible at everything. It did some things well. It at least worked at Texas. It didn't even work at Texas this year.
Yeah.
Although, in fairness, I guess the others were kind of nowhere last year, aside from Rennes, so maybe none of them like Texas. There could be that. Yeah,
it's probably an overall thing, because Texas is weird, the Honda's weird. You probably need a bit of a weird rider overall. You need a Marquez or a
Rins, I guess.
Very spirited Rins. But
Rins when Rossi's about to.
We're gonna move on now. Yeah, exactly.
So Rins, not today.
Yeah, of all races. Yeah, exactly. Imagine the record books that Valentino's last win was ending Marquez's streak at Austin. That would have.
It goes back to it being a rider's track, doesn't it? Because he always went quite well there.
Yeah, he did actually.
Aside from 13.
30. But that was the first year, and in 16 he crashed. 17 had a tire issue, and then 18, 19,
and he had a Zarco issue, I think, as well. That race.
Yeah, he did Zarco in the right leg, left leg, whatever. Anyway, moving swiftly on from the misery of Honda to basically a very good race. It was good battles throughout the main race, everywhere up and down the field, similar to Moto 2. We had 63 Ducatis from memory passing each other in every single corner, left, right, and centre. It was a race of like, do you know the way we say race of two halves is a race of 14 halves. I don't know what the factual figure of term that is, but you get the point that it just kept changing. Maverick, bad start. Maverick, not win. Marquez, good. Marquez, no wing. Miller do well, Miller go backwards, and it just kept going on. It was just so much going on that I was like, I don't know where to watch. I don't know who's going to
win. Beat Miller, by the way. Fabio Quartararo, the guy that went off the track on the first lap on a Yamaha, beating Miller.
And to be honest, right, take Pedro out of it, I'd respect Miller for being like, let's get us a bit of TV time, let's get a bit of coverage, we're not going to be anywhere else.
Because Binder wasn't that far from them either. Like, Costa was able to do it good. Although I think Binder had a broken finger, apparently, so...
He has like a broken foot in his leg from a motocross accident that somehow they all glanced over. He crashes in qualifying, gets up and limps back to the bike, and nobody mentioned it. So I went and dug it up, and he
think, maybe he's just a bit from the crash. Like.
That's the thing is, but then I watched the crash and it's in MotoGP terms a nice little low sider, and like again, it doesn't look like he caught his leg, so I went and dug in, and it was a motocross accident, and he's broken a bone in his foot. I'd imagine he must have broken a bone in his hand from that crash because there's no mention of that in the motocross incident. But yeah, so the fact he was a bit off it, and again, if you do remember back to last year, he crashed out of the race here in Texas. So
he did, didn't he? He was like
Binder,
miles wide
KTM,
on the double left, and he just like lost the front.
yeah, exactly, and just was a bit stubborn and slid off. So to see the checker flag and get some points is probably a good thing for Binder. And again, KTM's miserable weekend kind of continues. But kind of back to the main race. After the first 3 laps, Rhys, had you any idea who's going to win?
I'll be honest, I thought Marquez was going to win it, right? I was pretty certain that Marquez was going to win it until he fell off, to be honest. I kind of, at that point, I started to think, Marquez has got to get a move on here or Vinales is going to win this. Like, I decided it was one of those two winning at that point, and Vinales is still about 4th, but yeah, you were talking about how good the race was. It was phenomenal. It was one of the best races we've had for such a long time. And to be fair, all the races so far, GP-wise, have been pretty good. I mean, Qatar was a little bit dull. Acosta kind of made that interesting by kind of dive-bombing a few people, but the race was a little bit boring. Portimao was, I guess, kind of the same until Bagnaia decided to crash into to Marquez, but like
Acosta.
Yeah, exactly. Again, Acosta's making it interesting, and you can say the same thing here. But I feel like there was a step change this week because I think the others decided, right, we can't have this guy keep beating us like this. We kind of have to start putting the moves back on him a little bit. Because I think so far they're kind of like, well, he's a bit of a wild rookie, so we'll watch out. And it's like, he's actually not that far behind us in the championship. We should probably give him a bit back now so he doesn't think he could beat us so much. And I mean, Acosta's quote after the race is fantastic. Oh yeah, we're having fun passing with the boys. Like he was loving it. He just loved it, and it was great. That's what you want to see. That is what you really want to see. But it was such a good race. There's so many aggressive passes coming. It's great to see Marquez battling people at the front again. Clearly, Marquez and Bagnaia have not let last week go anyway. That's for sure. Bagnaia got mugged in the same spot twice, which I was a bit surprised by. Surely it happens once, you don't let it happen again. But there you go. Obviously, he didn't seem super strong on the brakes. He seemed a bit off again. I think maybe struggling on the bike a bit, maybe head issues, I guess, with Marquez beating him. And although I imagine he would have probably felt a bit more okay when he saw him go down, he probably thought, well, at least I know I was pushing. But yeah, it was one of those races. Hopefully, Kenny Roberts Jr. was a bit more satisfied with the main race than he was the sprint. He didn't seem too impressed with the sprint. He doesn't ask for much. He just wants everyone to be dive-bombing each other into the last corner. And it was about as close as you're going to get to that. So hopefully he enjoyed that one. But yeah, it was a great race. And I think we are going to touch on probably the biggest moment of that race a little bit later on. But I already said enough about what I'm going to say about Vinales. His amazing passes through the pack. It's great to see some aggressive battling. Not quite sure why Miller decided to ride into the side of Marquez on the exit of that turn 11. But that's another thing. But yeah, it was a proper good battle, and that's good because at Austin, like they kept saying, you get these spread out races half the time. The races are never that good, or the races are only good because it's such an easy track to crash. People start crashing, and it makes the race a bit more chaotic. Whereas this time it's just like, wow, they're dive bombing each other everywhere. That is fantastic, and that's not what we see enough of these days. So I don't think we'll see it as much at Jerez. I feel like you can't dive bomb as well there, but maybe unless it's the last corner. But you have to make sure you don't punt the other guy in the gravel.
Pedro the Boys Acosta, that's the new nickname.
Yeah. I saw you retweeted
just,
that.
Yeah, I got a great kick out of that a while ago. It's just like I had great fun battling the boys. I'm learning so much.
He's one of the lads now.
Yeah, it's
like you just jump on your mates with GP bikes and start dive bombing each other. We had a great time with the boys. It's like, that's what this guy's like in real life.
Yeah, exactly. And the way he rides is just...
It is so
oh my god, the onboards of the front camera where he just takes so much out on braking.
And he doesn't even move, like, he doesn't flinch, he just carries on riding. No. It's like, oh, you can hit him.
If you do that in a game, your stomach drops. Yeah. If you do it in real life, you release the brake, you go wide. Pedro's like, nah, the boys love when I do this.
For the cold
it's just, he is... he is crazy, and... He's exactly what the sport team did. Obviously, 21, we lose Valentino from the class, and GP just kind of went into a bit of a cold winter. Marquez not being at the front.
We sort of lost Marquez around the same time. That was we lost everybody at once, didn't we? We lost Rossi, Lorenzo, Pedrosa, Marquez, sort of with a very short period of time.
Exactly. They kind of got replaced by obviously Quartararo. We have Bastianini now, Martin Mir for the year or two, and Pecco. But as Pedro said last year, everybody's buddy, and he wanted to add a bit of Kevin Schwantz to it. And well, Kevin Schwantz was spectacular on the brakes and was a bit of a style icon. And so far, a certain Pedro is doing just that. And again, in Pedro style, he's set breaking records. Youngest ever podium finisher in 2 consecutive GP races. He, in my eyes, will break Marquez's record of youngest ever victor. I genuinely,
he hasn't got long to do that. How many rounds has he got? Because it does.
I believe it's like midsummer. I think it's up.
Oh,
so
yeah, so probably then. Marquez will be trying to stop him.
Yeah, exactly. Marquez will be trying to hold on. Marquez will be doing what Rossi tried to do and stop him taking on his records. Well, now I was watching today's race and I was thinking, Jesus, this is like 2013 all over again, because it's just like Marquez isn't Marquez that we know. Like Rossi at the time wasn't the 2004, 5, 6 Rossi where he was just unbeatable. It's just that little change, little shift, a couple of. Oh, 6, the bike was beatable, not very much him.
Really aspects to differ.
But just, my heart bleeds. Anyway, enough of that. 03, 04, 05, is that better for you? 2002 as well, for argument's sake.
I don't know. In Carl beat
the last cup,
South Africa, so.
Hold on, you found the one race he lost in that year. Anyway. The one race that year that he forgot to try hard enough. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we are going off topic again, so.
Very much so, yeah. It's getting late, so I need to start wrapping this one up so I can get it out for tomorrow. It's just, you can see that Marquez isn't what he used to be, and Pedro just has so much style and so much talent that, and I think as well, I think they will fall out. I just can see it happening.
They both love a good scrap, though, don't they? That's the thing. Like when they've been bashed each other,
as did Rossi and Marquez, though.
Yes, but I don't think I can't see Pedro Acosta getting. Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Okay, fair enough.
Pedro,
I can see.
Yeah, you know what I was gonna say. So
go on, share with the viewers.
Pedro isn't going to come off second best from a collision and then decide, yeah, you're not winning this year.
Yeah,
I think he would take it more.
I don't think he has to. Yeah, true. Swiftly moving on. I just don't think that Pedro kind of needs to play the game. I think Pedro's already as quick, if not quicker than Marquez. And again, just want to throw your minds back to Jerez 2023. KTM's best race of the year, best weekend of the year, and now we're going there after certain Pedro's had 2 podiums back to back. His best sprint, his best main race.
And another Pedro's going to be there, Pedrosa,
exactly. So there's going to be like 16 KTMs to match the 16 Ducatis. Simply, could Acosta win the main race at Jerez? I think he can.
I don't know, because I don't know if Jerez was such a good track for him. I don't think it suits him as well, because it's a bit flowy. Tell you who's going to be good at Jerez.
I'm looking forward to this.
I think Maverick Vinales might be.
Can't wait for the breakdown of lap 3 when the chain fires off. Anyway, moving swiftly on. There was good battles everywhere, but we're going to get to the point of the podcast that
you've been waiting for.
After, I'm not an anti-Marquez.
No, but they want to know our opinions on it. Well, there's not really much of an opinion.
Exactly.
There, but they want to hear us talk about it.
It was Rossi's fault.
Yeah, damn Rossi, bro. What's he doing?
So, of course, I don't know what lap it was. Yeah, exactly. Bang, he turned in. The crash that we all know that happened. I've seen Marquez talk about it. It kind of took saying it was a weird braking issue. To me, if you watch it back, he comes through the fast kink, goes up wide onto the green, comes back off the curb and then brakes and then kind of makes a V line for the apex, goes onto the dirty track and locks the front. He looks like, to me, he's going in hot and is a bit stubborn from the few times I've watched it back. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but a lot of the angles don't show the fact that he kind of goes off the track,
I didn't bounces
across the curb.
The last time I watched it, but then at that point he'd come back on the track for more than enough for the bike to have be stable again. So I don't know if that really played a part.
True, but you know, something you come back on it, you just miss your break point because you've just had a little moment.
He was pushing, wasn't he? He was trying to break Costa.
He definitely
and then he made a mistake and thought, I need to make sure that I keep making the gap, I guess. But
yeah, and I think as well that he knew. Well, he was.
I think he made a mistake coming on the pit board as well, because he seemed to make the moves all of a sudden when Vinales sort of got past Bastianini. unlike Bagnaia.
I think as well that I think he knew into that corner people were really strong on the brakes, and I think he knew that Pedro could maybe do something to him there. That Pedro was kind of just risking everything everywhere because he just could. So I think Marquez again makes that small mistake. Thinks shit, Pedro's just after getting the run on me. I have to just pinch and I think that's kind of
it's Honda mode, isn't it? He goes into the Honda.
Yeah, I think
he grabs the front brake
100%.
like he used to on the Honda. It just locks the front of the Ducati and kicks him off.
Yeah, like that front went early.
It almost did look like a mechanical problem, but I think it was. I mean, maybe he did have an issue with the brakes slightly. He had got the missing aero and stuff that would affect the braking.
That's true. Yeah, the balance will be affected, definitely.
But yeah, I just don't think he's quite right with the front end of the Ducati yet, which I don't think is particularly shocking if you know Ducati's history. I don't think it's ever had a very good front end.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
the one question I wanted to kind of ask you mainly, obviously, because we're here right now, but also it's one of those things where I'd like to get feedback from the viewer via YouTube or on Spotify. Before the start of the season, everybody's banging on Marquez this, Marquez that. He's going to win the title. He's going to make him look silly. He's going to do a Rossi 05, a Marquez 19, doing 95. Was that the year he was very dominant? One of the doing years, maybe all the doing years.
So Crayfall beat him once, guys, because he's on a better tyre.
Yeah, exactly. So, but basically, we've seen a couple of sprint podiums, a front row, 2 crashes. One wasn't his fault, but he's crashed out of the main race at Texas. Now, again, you could argue a small bit of damage.
He did that in his best ever season.
True, but that was genuinely a mechanical issue. Because, again, he had like 3 seconds on Rossi that day. Rossi isn't touching him that day.
Yeah, the bike pushed him.
Rossi
the
gets
bike
third.
Got confused with where he was on the track, pushed him into the corner and basically applied more throttle as he was on the brake.
Yeah, exactly. And shocked that doesn't like the corner.
Shocking that makes you crash.
So, yeah, exactly. Who would have known after all these years? So
doesn't take a
the big question is exactly. Yeah. Is where Marcus is right now? Is he living up to the potential of what he could do? I thought the way people have gone on about him and the way they've talked about him moving to Ducati and that he'd wiped the floor with everyone, he didn't win any race at Texas. Is that showing that he isn't the Marquez used to be? The Ducati isn't the bike he thought it would be? Is it showing that he's not compatible as much as he thought he could be with the Ducati? For me, it adds more questions than answers because
I think it says all those 3 things.
Yeah, I suppose in a way you could argue all 3. But
all 3. I mean, I think it's worth addressing. I don't know how founded it is, but there have been rumours coming out the paddocks that the GP23s have been turned down. The fact
it was noticeable
that the
today in the straight
media
line
have been speaking about it kind of gives it a bit more substance. It's not just Twitter conspiracy theories. And like you say, it was noticeable in the previous races. So, and if you look at the other GP23s, quite frankly, they're nowhere. Which shouldn't be happening when the bikes are supposed to be so close. I know they kind of banged on about how much of a step they made, but like usually they say that every year, and the previous bike is still close enough. I think they have made a big step this year, 23 to 24. The lap times have come down a lot. So maybe the bike Marquez is on is further away from the Ducatis than we realise. I think that's probably it is. I think there's truth to that. Whether it's like that they've turned them down on purpose, I don't know whether I believe that, but I think maybe the bikes are actually further off than we thought. And it does seem like the 22 was a little bit tricky. You had to get it set up right for it to work because Bastianini struggled with it. It seems like Bezzecchi's got the same problems. Di Antonio, aside from Marquez, really seems to be the one getting on with it the best out of a lot of them, and he's got his Frankie Carcetti set up on, hasn't he? So maybe that he's shared the setup to him. But maybe that's why Marquez is doing better as well. Maybe Frankie Carcetti is the secret link there between the two, getting those bikes to work. But I don't know. I think yes. I think it's fair to say he is not the guy he was before he broke his arm, and even before potentially it got the surgery on the arm to unbreak it, because he put some great performances in 2021. The field, the competition is higher. There's no doubt about that, because if you look back to 2019 when he last won, okay, if you look at the top riders, the only one that's still around is Vinales, and Vinales was on Vinales could challenge him occasionally, right? But Vinales was in his era where he was having a lot of issues with Yamaha, and Quartararo, I guess, kind of turned up towards the end, but wasn't really there. But his main rival was Dovi, and I like Dovi, and I think Dovi was probably better than I gave him credit for in his early career. But Dovi is no Pedro Costa or Jorge Martin or even Bagnaia, right? Like, he's not at least at that age, he was not that level anymore. Maybe in his early career, he was better, but didn't gel with the Honda. I think he was really good on the Tech 3 Yamaha, and this is a very strange tangent again, but it does relate to Marquez, I promise. But I feel like, what basically what I'm trying to say is the competition's now higher. Marquez is a little bit worse. It's like the Rossi leg break. There were signs of the old Rossi there occasionally, but he could never win races in the way that he did before in dominant fashion, aside from very rarely. And yeah, you're right, we've gone to the Marquez special track, and it gave me very much Sachsenring vibes of last year with the Honda. In his head, he's turned up thinking he's going to win there, and it's not come as easily as it has. And in the sprint race, apparently he had some sort of issue. The bike looked terrible in the first sector. He had a massive issue, and Carcetti was apparently really surprised he managed to get the podium with it. It looked a bit more stable. He looked a bit more comfortable in the main race. But obviously, like you say, he made the slight mistake. We think maybe he went to Honda mode. But there was the damage that may have played a part in it as well. Because he got the damage from Miller. I think maybe he picked up more from Martin? That was very brave of Martin to turn in, by the way. I mean, it was a ridiculous...
He definitely did.
It was a dive. It was a proper dive from Mark. I'm not going to lie.
To be honest, Roy, for me, it was a bit of a half-hearted one. He kind of leaves it. It's one of those ones where, like, he didn't really commit to it, just kind of went for it.
It's one of his late passes that he used to do on people, though. They used to get out of the way. It's the kind of thing he did to, like, Carl Abraham in, like, a practice session. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's... I've seen him pull that same move at Kota last corner before, like on somebody. Like, I remember vividly seeing it because the bike like moved in the same way. But yeah, it's a bit half-hearted. Martin is not your guy that's going to get out the way, that's for sure. Especially when he sees you as a threat. There's the contact there. So there might have been more damage, but he looks better. He genuinely looks better, and he hit the front. It's like, right, he's going to pull away now. And I guess, I mean, he's not immune to making mistakes. Even the old Marquez used to make mistakes, and I guess he was so dialed in that Honda that he could save the front. Maybe he'd have saved that before. I think it went too much, maybe. I think that's probably what... It probably just comes down to the fact that the front end of the Ducati is not as good as the front end of the... but basically, yeah, it's not as good as the front end of the Honda. I'll tell you what I was thinking in that race. I was thinking Marquez would actually be better on that KTM, I think, right now than on the Ducati. Because you could see how good it is on the front. It's basically what Honda want to build, right? The KTM, and that's always what the KTM was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like a better Honda, bit like the Suzuki.
And the Aprilia is exactly what the Yamaha want to build too. So it's a funny way of looking at it.
So those are they've just basically swapped now. So that's all I could think of in the race. I think that says a lot. But your actual question, I think, was do I think Marquez is the same guy he was before? And I think off the basis we've seen these first few races, I'm going to say no. I don't think so. I think the other guys are better, but I also think he's not as good. And I guess maybe some of the performances he pulled out in the 22 Honda really were... But he crashed a lot, didn't he, on that? So, I mean, I guess he was on the limit, and I guess what happened there. But I'll pass it back to you. I'll kind of say the same thing to you. I mean, I know you kind of already answered, but, you know, do you think that he's still the same guy that he was before?
Definitely not. For a couple of reasons. He doesn't have the Honda. Again, as you were kind of making the point there, I was thinking, these MotoGP bikes have DNA in them. They are the same bikes that they are 10 years ago in some aspects. The front end on Honda was always solid. He had a great relationship, even with the one that he ended up throwing at the scenery 100 million times last year. He's made the saves. Towards the end of the season, when he pulled out some good performances, he was still just playing with that front end like people wouldn't believe. Ducati, how often did we see Rossi crash it throughout the years? Then we had Hayden, we had Dovi, we had Cal on it. Front end was no more good. They couldn't. Dovi, even when he got towards the later part where it got better with the aero, still wasn't an amazing front end. I still think that the Ducati, when it goes, is gone, whereas the Honda probably gives so much feeling and chatter and it just gives him the understanding to save it on the elbow, on the knee, on the shoulder, on the hip, on the head, whatever way he does it. But just the way it is now, that Ducati, like, I go back to the warm-up crash he had in Portimao. That was a very strange crash when it was very early. Just got on the brakes and it went. And like, when they go, when you're somewhat upright or before you get your knee down, you ain't saving them. There's just no way you save them. And I think so many of his crashes so far, pretty much all of his crashes have been, rather, we'll take out the ride height device one in qualifying in Portugal, because that was a rider error. His one into turn,
a silly error though, isn't it? Like, not very Marquez kind of thing to do.
Exactly. Just shows that he's clearly not.
He's not comfortable.
That setup of that bike is just clearly isn't muscle memory. It's still something he has to think about, and he's probably working overtime mentally with that bike. But the crash into turn 5 into Torque VIP in Portugal, not one where it's probably protesting a bit. He's probably tried to stick it in, and again it goes quite early. And again, most of the crashes with the Ducati seem to go the very initial part of the braking. It's not the last bit of the corner as you release the brake, get on the throttle, as where nearly all his practice crashes with the Honda in qualifying. It just protests. It's going, it's chattering. He's trying to just do the handbrake turn, and that's when it goes. Whereas like the Ducati's spitting off a lot earlier. And if I was a Marquez fan, I'd probably be looking at that as a bit of a worrying sign, that the fact that he can't get to the point where he can save it. It's going so early that it's something that's the confidence upper one, is where they go so early, because you're like, geez, what to do wrong there? At least a lot of his Honda crashed, he's like, well, alright, I was taking the piss there, that's on me, I tried to save it, I want to know where the limit was. Whereas I don't think he has the limit factor perfectly kind of sewn in yet with the Ducati. I think there's a bit of a, just that last couple of percent is a bit of a grey area. He just doesn't know how to get into that window like he could with the Honda. And again, I think this goes back that the Honda was just naturally did better things. You mentioned this week the Honda wasn't bad everywhere. It has better features than the Ducati, and I imagine that's exactly what he's kind of referring to in kind of reading between the lines, that he's just talking about how he could just play with the front end, just manipulate the bike at that point of the corner where he could have the difference. Whereas with the Ducati, I think the Ducati has a cardboard cutout, and you have to kind of fit that to ride it. It's a Pecco, it's a Martin, it's a Digi, a Bezzecchi, that kind of cutout of riding style, whereas Marquez is trying to maybe just chisel himself into that. And at the moment, he just kind of is fighting it. I think still, push comes to shoves, he is 93 on a Repsol, and that's, I think, his biggest issues, because that's not something we can say Rossi had to do. Rossi came back on a Yamaha after the leg break, of course, goes to the Caddy, came back, maybe I had to adjust the style again for a year, struggled in 13, but we didn't really see have to completely change his style for a different style of bike, like the 2010 Yamaha to 2013 versus the 20. Really? It's maybe slightly, obviously, slight differences, but nothing outrageous. Whereas now we have, from think of when he last won his last title, alright, they had wings, but now we have aero fairings, aero kind of front ends, we have ride height devices, the launch control device at the start where they squat the rear. So much of this tech that's new to him that he's trying to learn on a different bike. So it's an interesting sport. Every time we go to the track, there's always something to talk about. I think Marquez is just in the middle of a transitional period, and I think I'm gonna finish this point with throwing another question back to you, because I'm not too sure, because everybody who was anyone Marquez title in the bag, number 9, number 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 are all gone again because he's got off that Honda. But now we're sitting there going, well, it's probably not been the start he wanted. 2 DNFs in main races, more crashes than I expected. I thought the fact he got on Ducati, he'd try and stop the crashing. Now,
it's part of him.
Funnily enough,
even like a Moto2 and a 125, he chucks out the scenery so often. Like, it's just how he learned. I mean, have you seen that video of him where he's on that little mini bike, and like, is it like him, like Paul and Aleix, like when they were like little kids, and like they basically still all had the same traits, and Marquez was still throwing it up there and picking it back up, like, it's
madness. But to finish on the Marquez point, can he win the title this year?
I don't know now. I don't see why he can't still win the title, because we've seen comebacks happen, and if you start running on a run of form, like, I mean, Martin has had a very good start to see. Martin's the threat really at the moment, like, because he's just got such a lead on everybody. I mean, like, he's got a pretty handy lead over Enea still second, isn't it? And then Vinales third. I think it would have been the other way around, but because Bastianini overtook Martin, it swapped it around a little bit. But mathematically, because he gets to, let's say he finally gets it sorted, because at least in the main race he looked better. He looked, I think, the best we've seen him look on the bike until he had the crash. At least in my opinion.
But is that Marquez over his limit to do that though? Is that the question we have? Is that Marquez running ragged Argentina 2018?
But I don't mean in terms of the
Marquez?
pace it looked better. He just looked more at home until, like, he was going for those Marquez kind of moves that we haven't seen him really do yet. Like, we've seen him sort of like be aggressive with people, but especially on like lap 1, but we haven't seen him like absolutely sort of sending on people, and he was doing that. I know it didn't quite maybe pull off, but especially in sector 1 he looked a bit more like how he I don't know, I thought he looked more comfortable, because I was surprised that he fell off. Like, I thought he was going to just pull the pin now. He'd had enough of sitting behind a Costa and getting dive bombed by like Bagnaia and stuff, so he was just going to go. Because, I mean, he clearly was trying to go when he went past Martin. He'd obviously decided at that point he wanted to go. But it didn't work out and he lost the spots. So then he kind of had to reassess again and go again. So I think he can still take some positives, because, I mean, again, he was still on the podium in the sprint race, and he would have been on the podium, I'm sure, in the main race had he not crashed. So the pace is there, and the pace is there over a race distance, which was the problem. He was good over one lap and couldn't do it over the whole race. Now, I know he crashed with plenty of race to go, I guess, but, you know, in Portimao he crashed on the last lap, so that's, you know, he pretty much did the whole race there. Like, I think if he could get like a win, maybe he would start to win more, and I feel like he could go on a run of win. Like, if he started to win, obviously he could catch it. Like, it's not impossible that he'll win the championship, but I think a lot less of a chance than I did. I think maybe even Acosta has more of a chance now because of how good he's been. Like, because Acosta will definitely keep getting better, whereas you can't say Marquez definitely will keep getting better, but I think he probably will, as he gets more comfortable with the bike. And I mean, you've got to remember there is also his pre-season testing was full of lots of mechanical issues. He's then now got Jerez next as a race, and then straight after a test at Jerez. So there's a whole weekend to try and dial the bike in, and then a whole few more days to find out what they've learned from that race weekend. Or not a few more days, a whole day, should I say. So, and then we're getting towards Le Mans, which I think is a track he's gone fairly well at in the past. And I think then we do get towards sort of Mugello, which I don't think is really a Marquez track, so I wouldn't expect much there. But I think it's possible. I know it's a very quick answer of what you wanted, probably. So I think it's still possible, but I don't think the chances are that high.
Yeah, for me, I never thought he'd walk this season. I thought that if he wins it, it's going to be a bit of a scrap, and he'd probably win it in a way that, I suppose, in a way that Rossi should have won 15, where he wins the races that he's good. He's there and comfortably faster than the rest of the field and the other races. And to be honest, up until like 5 laps ago in the sprint or the main race in Portugal, he'd been doing that. He'd been taking pretty much the maximum that he felt was on table, and he was slowly building. And to be honest,
he still was doing that. To be fair, in that race, it wasn't his mistake.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I mean. That he was getting the max out. He believes he was Kirkland-Pecco, and again, the mistake between whoever you want to blame for that, we've covered that already. He was doing the most that he needed to do. He was doing pretty much what he was doing on the Honda last year. I was like, right, well, the best I can finish without throwing this at the scenery is probably 7th. I'm going to finish 7th, 15 seconds off the win or whatever would have been, and I'll comfortably be top Honda by a mile. He was top 23 Ducati pretty much everything so far. I think that he probably thought that, to be honest, I think he thought he'd be quicker this weekend. I think he might be a little bit disappointed at speed, because again, he's very good at the media managing, saying top 5 if you could, brilliant. If you said right now I get a podium in the main race, I'd sign. You don't get an 8-time world champion that believes that a podium is a great result at a track like that. It's in his blood that he wanted a victory today, and that's probably how he ended up crashing. He risked that bit more to maybe try and break Acosta, like you mentioned earlier. And overall, it's been a bit tougher. And I think maybe it might change his approach going forward, because I think he might think as well, now that he's lost 25 potential points today, 16, 14, 12 points maybe in Portimao, where he lost a couple of points with the crash, and we don't know exactly where we'll finish, but he's definitely after losing the bones, we'll say, of 40 points, which is huge in GP. We talk about how hard it is to recover 10 points, never mind almost 2 race wins, so he's already put himself in a difficult situation. and the fact that he didn't sweep the floor with them, at Kota, shows that isn't the markers that we think he's going to be. So like we have Sachsenring is his next kind of, we'll say, marquee event, and then we've Aragon and in Valencia, and of course we could probably push Jerez in there. You could say maybe Catalunya as other tracks that you'd expect him maybe to go very well at, but the kind of marquee tracks would be Sachsenring and Aragon for the rest of the season. It'd be interesting to see what he can do at Austria, because that's a track he's always, you feel like, gone over the limit to try and beat a bike that he was never going to be beat. Now he's on one, and again with maybe a bit of a speed disadvantage. Can he do it? That'll be a real interesting weekend. But if we get to Sachsenring and he's fourth in the championship, like 60 points back, and still hasn't won a race, I think that's the championship over. I don't think he's going to be able to recover that back. I don't see in modern GP someone going on a long winning streak. We've seen Pecco go missing. Vinales has this spike of form. We've seen Aleix be strong, go missing. The KTMs bar Pedro are hit or miss at the moment. Martin is a bit of a yo-yo, but at least he's doing it from first to third, kind of that range, so he's still taking big points every race, and that's why he has a nice lead in the championship. So I think the current situation in GP, it's going to be very difficult to make up a lot of positions in the championship and a lot of points if he lets the lead slip. So I think he'll need a very strong Jerez Grand Prix weekend, and I think he make a very good point there of having a one-day test. He can test so much there that it's going to be huge. Le Mans will be probably the big telltale there, because we usually get a bit of weather there. It's a decent track on paper for Ducati. It's been a good one for a couple of years for them now. He's gone very well there himself in the past, so I would like to see what he can do there. And again, if he has, maybe we have seen riders go to the Jerez Grand Prix or Barcelona, for example, have the one-day test and come back. I remember vividly Miller in 21 after the Barcelona test make a massive difference over a seat change in the seat unit. So it's these things in these tests that you can change that.
To change the seating position in the
change
ride.
Seat in the factory, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's one of these things where it's still building. But just the fact that how we've seen this weekend so far, or this weekend particularly, everybody thought this was going to be nailed on pole, sprint and victory. Front row, podium and a crash is not what people would have thought coming into this one. So it's a pretty interesting one. Maybe a bit worrying if you're a 93 fan, but we're going to move on and finally finish this podcast off with Pedro the Shark, the boys Acosta. Rhys, what do you want to say about Pedro before we finish? Because he has left me speechless on so many occasions already at the start of this season.
Yeah, I suppose we've touched on him a little bit throughout the podcast so far with some of the passes he's pulling, so probably won't spend too much time, because I've also spent a lot of time on every other point, so maybe don't want to take too long on it. But he's just been phenomenal, hasn't he? He keeps getting better and better. I mean, Qatar was already good. There was like, wow, but okay, he at least tested there, so he was always going to be good there. We get to Portimao. Oh wow, he's destroyed the two factory KTMs at this track, and he's learning from the sprint races every time. And it's like, you get to Austin, this is a really difficult track. Wow, it's on the front row, and okay, he was literally battling for the win in the sprint. Okay, he's definitely going to battle for the win in the GP, and it's like, okay, he's got the whole shot. Vinales has been sent to the Shadow Realm. He's battling pretty aggressively with all these guys, these World Championship riders like Martin and Bagnaia and Marquez, and just outbreak it. Like you said, that old board shot earlier, every time into the hairpin, he was gaining yards on people. He was gaining yards on Bagnaia, who is considered one of the latest breakers in MotoGP, and it's just ridiculous. Like, the guy is so good, it is ridiculous. Like, I think the only mistake I've seen him make was he almost hit Martin at the back once into turn 11, and he ran wide. That was the only thing I think I saw him do wrong all race. He didn't make a single mistake. Clearly, the tyre issue is not a problem for him anymore. He burnt his tyres up once in Qatar, specifically once, and has immediately learned to not do that ever again, and how to not do that ever again, which is crazy, because Jack Miller still can't look after a tyre, and he's been in MotoGP a decade. You know, like, as a rookie, like, especially because he came straight from Moto2, and we said this earlier on the podcast, before we got the Pirellis, they were like bowling balls. You can just go on them all day. So, and Moto3, there was no such thing as tyre wear, because the bikes are so light and the tyres are so durable. So he's had to learn, basically, saving a tyre, and he learned that in one race, how to do that, and has done that ever since. It is just remarkable. and it will not be long until he wins a race at all. I don't know if he'll win at Jerez, because I just don't feel like the track suits him that well. I could be wrong. Like, it's probably like where you look at the stats, he's won like every time they've been there, but I'm pretty sure he's not. Last year it was Lowe's that won there, wasn't it, in Moto 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, Acosta and Lowe's, the two main championship rivals, as TNT stated.
Yeah, and bear in mind, Arbolino was leading the championship when they said that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So nine.
How does that make you feel? Your country speaking such porkies on live air. Oh,
It's irrelevant. It's a relevant point. But yeah, I can't remember. Oh yeah, I remember his Moto 3 one now. He struggled, didn't he? Didn't qualify very well. Came through, and
he doesn't like.
It was just dive bombing everybody into Pedrosa corner. But it was so yeah. I don't see him winning at Jerez, but Le Mans. Now he's been pretty good there, so we will see. But yeah, I was fairly certain that maybe he could win a race, maybe a sprint race going into the season, like because he'd look so good in testing. It's like he'd definitely maybe get a couple of podiums. Well, he's already had 2 out of 3 podiums. Not quite got the hang of the sprint races yet. That seems to be the thing. I mean, he still finished 4th. Like, that's still very good, but he's not quite got a podium in the sprint yet. But then, who cares? The main points are on the Sunday, so yeah, I expect him to get a win at some point. The guy is just amazing. There's not much more to say. Just look at what he does on the bike. It is like watching Marquez from like 13 again. He's snapping the bike everywhere. He's just showing all these guys who are the established sort of legends, champions, like just not afraid of him. And I think it's just even more telling that, like, I know you especially, you have very much been a champion of Binder in the past because of like, and I've sort of agreed with you, like some of the rides he's put in on that KTM. You put Acosta on that bike last year in some of those situations, there's definitely a few race wins there. Like, I reckon he wins Chang and stuff like that. You know, some of the races where Binder probably should have been there to pick up the pieces. I mean, he beat them at Portimao, that was embarrassing, but at least Binder finished 4th behind him. Okay, we have kind of uncovered, you've done your detective work and found out that Binder was injured, but I'm pretty sure they were almost 3 in a line in like 12th, 13th, something like that, right? They were nowhere, and he was battling for the win and almost won the race. Was like about 2 seconds off Vinales, or less than 2 seconds off Vinales. Like, it's
the big issue with the KTMs is again I do a little bit of when you're kind of in your point.
Well, I'm rambling on about a load of rubbish about like Rossi breaking his leg and on about Moto 3. Like,
when you're writing your novels, I go and check Twitter. So basically all other 3 KTMs went soft. Costa was heavily against going on soft, said medium was the only way to go. And well, yeah, Augusto Fernandez said it's been embarrassing. The 3 of us basically got it wrong, and the rookie got it right. So that's even more scathing coming from a seasoned campaigner in kind of Grand Prix racing, as is Augusto Fernandez. Obviously, only 2nd year in Grand Prix, but he's been riding bikes a long time now.
Yeah, it's something that I know he said he was something about a risk taking the medium, but let's put it this way. 1st and 2nd in the race used the medium tyre. That was the correct tyre decision. End off, basically. I'm pretty sure the only 2 people that picked it finished 1st and 2nd. So it was I think it's fairly safe to say it's the right choice, especially considering they weren't exactly looking after their tyres during that race, I don't think. I think maybe at some points there was a bit, but Vinales has come through the pack and Pedro Acosta was dive-bombing everybody, so yeah, I'm out of words for the guy. It just is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, and like it's one of those things where you almost think like Martin needs to try and win this championship because he ain't gonna get another chance if Acosta's this good.
Yeah.
Like, this is the prime
100%.
chance for him. Same with almost like Marquez in a way. Like, you need to make sure you beat him this year because you're not beating him again. Like, this kid is too good, too good.
This is the KRJR season where like he ain't winning this year, he ain't winning again, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, he'll crash trying to beat Caparossi and Biaggi at Mugello, and then he'll win at Donington. Oh no, wait, maybe not.
Right, well, race to finish off, we have basically the start of the championship from next time out. We go to Jerez, we go to the start of the European one. We always say this is where the season kicks off. What have you made, if we just kind of glance back at the 3 rounds we've had so far to finish off this podcast, what have you made of GP in 24?
It's been very good. It's been very good so far. There are more riders capable of winning races, which is what we want, really. It's not quite played out the way I expected, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It seemed like from Qatar that we were just going to get a repeat of Bagnaia versus Martin, which, don't get me wrong, was fantastic to watch last year, and I would gladly have watched another season of that. But clearly, it is going to be a lot more than that. I'm really happy. You know what? Someone that we haven't really mentioned at all in any of the 3 episodes so far, Enea Bastianini. I'm happy to see him back up there week in, week out. I think it's safe to say now that he's going to be there week in, week out. He's been there every round so far. To be honest, he's been better than Pecco so far this season, really, hasn't he? So I think it's great to see him up there. Really. Martin's still up there. Marquez obviously is now up there. Yes, he's not had maybe the best start, but I think he will get there. Acosta's up there. You're going to have Binder there some rounds. I reckon eventually... Oh, well, we've got Vinales, obviously. How did I almost get Vinales? I mean, I reckon the odd round or two, we could see Franco Morbidelli, because there was some green shoots this weekend. I reckon...
There wasn't there,
He could we get to Misano, we could maybe see it.
Wait till he gets to Misano, he wins. I'll make Rhys look like a little storyteller about what he's going on about Vinales when I get on about Morbidelli.
So, yeah, so far been much more open than I thought it would be, and I'm really glad to hear that. To be honest, the biggest issue we have is that Martin's got such a big lead at the moment because he's been the most consistent out of the lot, but we'll see. I like Martin, so it's not... I don't mind, but I'd like, for the actual sake of a close championship, we could do with losing a couple of points here and there, maybe having it a bit closer. So, yeah, it's been really good so far, and I'd love to see some more guys get involved, but just can't really see it because I just don't think anybody else really has either the equipment or the ability to get up there constantly. Like I say, I think we will have Binder there most weekends. I think this is an off weekend for Binder, but it seems like Acosta is just better than him. So. Which is really something I didn't think I'd say after 3 rounds, but it has been conclusively proven at this point, I would say. So, yeah, that's my takeaway. I'll pass the same thing back to you. I guess maybe it's probably going to be a similar kind of thing, but yeah.
At this point, I can barely remember the question. All I'm saying is I'm loving GP. It's been a great start to the season.
What have you noticed from these first few rounds? What are you sort of takeaways?
Costa is... Well, you're right. We're going to end the podcast on this little joke, really, because it's hilarious, because it's not a joke, it's a little thing that I noticed myself, that sharks, not all sharks, if you think of sharks, and like the one he has in his hand is a great white's brains are the size of like peanuts. They are like very known stupid animals, and Pedro Costa is not stupid. It's kind of funny that's his that the doctor had that Marcus is the ant, Lorenzo was a Spartan, and we have
is that what that was?
What?
That was a Spartan. I never knew what that logo was.
Yeah, he was meant to be like a Spartan warrior.
It does make sense now. I never really pieced together what it was. I thought, that's like the Lorenzo logo. I don't really know what it was, but yeah.
And listeners, you've just listened to this man talk for 2 hours about being somewhat of an expert about the sport. Anyway, on that beautiful note, we are going to end this podcast. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with the Jerez Grand Prix. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave us a rating on Spotify, and if you want to drop your feedback in Spotify, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. See you in 2 weeks in Andalusia. Bye bye.